Meeting at Woking Borough Council on Thursday, the 19th of November 2020. Some administrative points first. Please ensure that any mobile devices or mobile phones are switched off. If you are not speaking or being asked to speak, please mute your microphones. If you do not mute your microphone, it will be muted for you. To assist people viewing the meeting, could everyone turn off their cameras and only turn them on when speaking, and also introduce themselves whenever they begin to speak? To ensure the smooth running of the meeting also, could members wishing to speak please use the hands up facility on Teams. If you click the hand symbol, it appears on the screen as a yellow hand in the air. And use that whenever possible. Please note also that the meeting is currently being webcast live. We now move on to the agenda items. Agenda item 61 is apologies. Does anyone have any apologies for absence?
I have two apologies, Mr. Mayor. One is Guy Granderson and the second is Sarah Kerr.
Thank you, just those two. Okay then, we move on to agenda item 62, which is the bid.
I've also got an apology from Councillor Gary Cowan, who's struggling with the technology and is unable to get in at this moment in time, but is still trying.
Okay, so he's a possible absence.
Yes.
Thanks. Okay, we'll move on to the second item, item 62, which is the minutes of the meeting. Does anyone have any amendments to the minutes of the meeting, of the last meeting? And if you have, then we need to know about them. Can I therefore have members' agreement to the minutes? I will assume that you are in agreement with the minutes unless anyone advises that they disagree, and I'll give you a few moments to do that. You can use the hand symbol if you wish. No one's putting their hands up, so I'm assuming that everybody is in agreement. And they will be suitably processed. Right. Agenda item 63 is declarations of interest. Does anyone wish to declare an interest? No one? No hands? Okay.
Again, apologies, I have put my hand up. Councillor Fruin here.
Okay.
I am a member of the Thames Valley Police due to the fact that I volunteer as a community, a cadet leader, so therefore there is an interest there, I should declare.
Okay, thank you for that. Just the hands normally appear on the different part of the screen, and they're now appearing underneath your photo and name. Sorry for that. And that's the only declaration of interest then. Thank you. We now move on to agenda item 64, which is the Mayor's announcements. Since I became Mayor a few months ago, the first few months were incredibly quiet, of course, because we had no council meetings and everybody was in lockdown. In the last couple of months, things have become a little more active, or on a temporary basis, a little more active. And so I have been involved in doing a few things. Just recently, I opened a new road, which is the Arborfield Cross Relief Road, which also has a bridge across it, the what's known as the Green Bridge, I believe. It's a very impressive road, and it was a very pleasant event to go to. Everybody suitably socially distant, of course. And another thing did recently was do a number of annual general meetings with charities and associations, and those of course are all virtual meetings, so there could be lots of those, and I can do them all from one place. Another event I did, which I think is worthy of mention, is where I opened a brand new major extension to Addington School, which is a very impressive building. I had the tour of it, and it's a very impressive development. And I think that's basically all I need to say on Mayor's announcements for the moment. Thank you. I'll now move on to agenda item 65, which is public question time. Can I remind you that it was 30 minutes for this, so you can have questions and supplementaries will be allowed. But can I just remind you that supplementary questions must relate either to the original question that was asked or the response that is given to that question. And can I ask also that in order to get through them as effectively as possible, if you could get directly or fairly promptly to the question and quite clearly rather than a long preamble, and it also then allows a good time for the answer. So at that point, I would like to invite Councillor Daniel Hinton to ask his question of Councillor Clark.
Good evening, thank you, Mayor. Councillor, I am aware of the continuing improvement programme in relation to children with special educational needs and disabilities. How has the production of education, health and care plans improved as part of this programme?
Thank you very much for your question. There has been a marked improvement in completing the educational, health and care plans within the statutory 20 weeks. In Q1 this year, 88% were issued within the timescale, compared to 58.7% across England. And we could do this because, having previously been understaffed, we now are fully staffed. It's also important to note that in addition to significant improvements in timeliness, we have been just as robust in our understanding of an improvement of quality in respect of the educational, health and care plans.
Thank you. Do you have a supplementary to ask, Councillor Hinton?
No, thank you very much. That's great to hear. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that then. Okay. We now move on to Jackie Rance to ask her question also of Councillor Clark.
Yes, good evening. Can the lead member for Children's Services advise us on activities to support schools as they have reopened at the beginning of September?
Yes, the preparation for the reopening.
You've frozen, Councillor Clark. No one disappeared. I'll give it just a few more seconds for this, and then what we can do is move on to the next question, and at the end of that, hopefully Councillor Clark. The next question is also for Councillor Clark, on notice. So in that case, we jump over two of them. In that case, can Philip Cunnington ask his question of Councillor Margetts?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I ask the Executive Member for Health, Wellbeing and Adult Services if he can tell me the latest situation with COVID-19 within Wokingham?
Okay, thank you. The latest situation is there was an increase in cases last week, with 266 cases recorded over the week up to the 12th of November. This is a weekly rate of 155.4 per 100,000. I should add that Wokingham remains below both the England rate and the South East weekly rate. Our biggest rise of cases was previously amongst the 18 to 30 age group, but we now have rising cases in all age groups. On the 19th of November, there were 1,789 confirmed COVID cases of COVID among Wokingham residents since the beginning of the pandemic. This is a rate of 1,045 per 100,000 people. Considering all cases to date, we remain well below the England average. In response to this, the Council has stood up a full emergency response procedures, which have been led by the Chief Executive. These include COVID marshals out and about in the borough working alongside our public protection teams, a network of COVID champions across the borough, a successful local case tracing service that complements the national service. We've written to and called all the vulnerable people in the borough to check that they have everything they need. We've dedicated care, home and education task forces. We have a data team led by our public health consultant to continually monitor the current situation. We continue to work with the voluntary sector as before via One Front Door. I'd like to personally thank all the officers from across the council, the voluntary sector and the community at large for all their efforts to protect us from the virus. We're all in this together, and to keep infection rates down, it's vital that everyone keeps the rules and minimises social contact. And remember, please, everyone, that support is available from WBC and all our partners via One Front Door, and wherever possible, WBC services are still open for business.
Thank you, Councillor Margaret. Do you have a supplementary question at all, Councillor?
Yes.
Sorry.
Yes, please, if I can. Thank you, and I'd like to also thank the councillors, the officers and the volunteers, because they have done such a fantastic job for Wokingham. Something that's been particularly of concern, I think we're all aware that there was an outbreak of COVID at a care home in Shinfield, and I wonder if you could update me and let us know what's happening there, please.
Sure. Yes, I mean, a very significant outbreak at a care home in Shinfield. I mean, the situation as it stands today is the total number of staff who tested positive during the outbreak today to 49. Total number of residents positive during the outbreak 45, so the largest one we've had so far. Sadly, 5 residents have died, and I would take this opportunity to pass on my condolences to the families involved. 2 remain poorly, and again, they take this opportunity to pass on my best wishes. At the moment, basically, this has obviously caused us significant issues, basically, in terms of management, because not only do you have the healthcare issue to respond to, we had an issue where 49 staff effectively were positive and had to go home and isolate, which created tremendous pressure, basically, on staffing the home over the crucial period. I should make clear, basically, that one might assume from the outside that this level of COVID cases would indicate basically something seriously had gone wrong in the home. At the moment, we can find absolutely no evidence that this is the case. And I should make clear the reports I have seen have been very complimentary about the home manager and also the dedication of the staff, many of whom actually lived in the home during the critical period to support the residents. So I wanted to thank them for that. The Care Homes Task Force, the Public Health England, the CCG have been involved fully, and an investigation is now going on to find out what the possible cause would be. I'm pleased to say that we're over the worst of this from a managerial situation, and I just wanted to thank all the people who worked so hard to make this, to move this forwards. In particular, I also want to take this opportunity to thank Councillor Fruin, who contacted me literally probably within an hour of finding out about this, offered his assistance, and was a great aid in pointing out local parts of the community where we're extra reassurance, extra signage, and visits from COVID marshals just to make sure COVID procedures were being followed, could be put in place quickly.
Thank you, Councillor Margaret.
Mr. Mayor, I'm back. May I answer Jackie Ranch's question?
Sorry, I'm just going to note that you're back in the meeting, Councillor Clark.
Yes, and I'd like to answer the question, which
exactly. I'm just going to come back to you right now. That was the purpose of this.
Okay.
Please ask your question. Or are you happy with the question, or do you need it to be asked again, Councillor Clark?
Well, it's up to Jackie Ranch what she wants to do.
Did you hear that you heard the question? I'm happy to hear your answer.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
proceed
all right,
then, Councillor Clark.
So the preparation for the reopening of schools commenced back in the summer term. School leaders were supported with round-table sessions to help unpick and understand the requirements of the Department for Education's guidance, including the public health requirements for safe operation of schools from September onwards. The work continued over the summer holiday period, and we looked at the home-to-school transport to ensure that pupils could make the safest possible journeys to school. The schools revised the operating times and entrance and departure arrangements from their schools. The Assistant Director for Learning, Achievements and Partnerships has provided a daily update to all school leaders in the borough. There is also a weekly news bulletin. All school leaders are invited to weekly leadership roundtable discussions, which focuses on sharing best practice and learning from other areas. School governors have also been supported with additional briefing sessions from governor services. In addition, further specific focused activity has taken place across a range of service areas within the council, including activities delivered by the school improvement team, educational psychology, the ICT in schools team, education welfare service, and schools HR services, amongst other things.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have hopefully a fairly brief supplementary at all?
No, I don't. No, I don't. Thank you.
Thank you. In fact, you're going to be fairly busy, Councillor Clark, because Anne Chadwick also has a question for you.
Yeah.
Yes, hello, I'm Anne Chadwick, a Woodley Town councillor. So it's a question again for the Executive Member for Children's Services. I've been very concerned to read on social media about children going hungry in half term because their parents struggle to feed them lunch. Would the Executive Member tell me what the council did during half term, and does the Executive Member share my concern?
Well, firstly, I like to say that no child or young person should go hungry. And this council is committed to ensuring support is available for those families who need it in this very difficult time. We have been working closely with our voluntary sector partners throughout this pandemic to ensure that access to support is available when needed. For example, our community engagement teams have been working with the voluntary sector to run holiday schemes, such as the Grub Club over the summer. Immediately before October half term, we assessed current support networks and looked at the feasibility of providing further help if needed. Support networks were working well, and so we took the decision to concentrate our efforts on planning support over the difficult winter months. We have welcomed the announcement of Winter Grant Scheme funding from the Department of Work and Pensions to support families from December through to March 2021. And we are moving swiftly to put channels in place to deliver support where it is most needed. The government has made substantial funds available, and Wokingham Borough Council is getting in excess of £200,000. And that money is to be used from December 2020 to March 2021. 220 million for expansion of the Department for Education's holiday activities and food program to build on the existing program, which supported 50,000 children in the country over the summer, and will ensure provision for Easter, summer and Christmas 2021. £63 million were committed in June 2020 to assist those struggling to afford food and other essentials, of which Wokingham Borough Council received £77,000. This was used as part funding for the £110,000 costs of care packages distributed from the voluntary sector hub. I can assure you, all money that is passported to us by the government will be used to help the vulnerable in our community.
Thank you, Councillor Clark.
Sorry, yes, just
Yes,
thank you very
thank
much
you for that. Do you have a quick supplementary at all?
No, I don't have a supplementary question. No, I'm very pleased to hear all of that. Thank you very much.
Next one is Norman Jorgensen to ask his question of Paribas, Councillor Paribas.
Good evening, thank you. At the time of the heavy rain in October, I spoke to residents affected and observed the flooding at Egremont Drive in Airlie. The culvert and bushes at that point make a restriction to the water flow in the stream, which causes the flooding. I wrote to Parry and the council at the time, asking that the restriction is removed so that residents are not flooded every time there's heavy rain. I was pleased to hear from an executive member that works are planned. Please will you provide me with an update?
Good evening, Norman and Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Norman, for your question, and also First of all, I'd like to thank your good self and Councillor John Halsall, who turned up very, very promptly to assess the extent of the flooding in Egremont drives there. So thank you both. And now the answer to your question, following investigation of the flooding issues at Egremont Drive, the council will be removing the concrete culvert in the ditch next to the path. Now, in order to do this, there is some tree clearance work required, and this is a result of the roots of these trees growing into the culvert and exacerbating the blockage, preventing water from flowing downstream. Following inspection of the council's tree officers, who are satisfied with the removal of the 3 trees, in the interests of reducing flood risk to the nearby properties. It has been arranged for these trees to be removed. The council's drainage contractor will then be in a position to remove the culvert which is causing the problem. It is hoped that these works will remove the restriction for the flow of water downstream, in turn reducing the risk of further flooding to properties on Egremont Drive. Subject to weather conditions, it is hoped that these works will be completed all well by Christmas, Norman. So light at the end of the tunnel.
Thank you. Mr. Jorgensen, do you have a supplementary at all?
Yes, I do, just very quickly. Thank you, that's very good news, thank you. One concern I have is that by doing this work, we might create a problem further downstream, that more water will get downstream more quickly. Just wondered if you've considered that in the assessment, please.
Thank you, Norman. Yes, I think you're perfectly right. We have done some more work, further work, and further sort of modelling studies to prove that removing the culvert will not cause further flooding downstream. So I'm confident of the advice given by the officers that this should cure the problem. There shouldn't be any problems further downstream.
Okay, thank you. And we have a further question here. So would Juliet Sherratt ask her question of Councillor Clark, please?
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hello, good evening. I'd like to ask a question about identifying children at risk. How is the council planning to ensure that no child suffers holiday hunger, whether they're under 5 and not eligible for preschool meals, or they fall into the gap between the poverty line and free school meal eligibility? Thank you.
Thank you for your question. We will work closely with our frontline services, our partners, including schools, early years settings and health, and the voluntary sector through the Citizens Advice Bureau to understand how we can best identify those children who are not in receipt of free school meals, who need our help. The Citizens Advice Bureau has acted as the front door into the COVID community response service during the pandemic and is well placed through its own experience of community need throughout the pandemic and through its links with other voluntary organizations to support us alongside our partners in ensuring we reach all children who need our support. It is important that all of us in the borough, residents and councillors alike, ensure that no child, no matter what age, goes without food. It's important that it is communicated, perhaps to me or to the Citizens Advice Bureau, but we must never let any child in the borough go hungry.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Do you have a supplementary question, Ms. Sherratt?
Yes, I have. Given the short time scale till the Christmas holidays, how does the council plan to deliver on the holiday and food programme as promised by the government, and what will this look like for Woodley?
I can't tell you the details of this because we are presently working out how to do it. And everyone will be treated the same, so there will not be any different things arranged for Woodley. So you just have to bear with me. I promise that we will have this in place in time for Christmas.
Right. Thank you for that. That's the questions completed. We now move on to agenda item 66, which is petitions. Does anyone wish to hand in a petition? If you'd like to raise your hand to draw attention to, perhaps. Okay. I have here a list of people. Is Mr. Dennis there?
Yes, I am.
He has a petition. Would you like to hand in the petition, please?
Hello.
Well, before you hand it in, you do have 3 minutes to summarise it. If you wish.
So I'm going to speak to that as opposed to read out the petition. So here we go. Hello, my name is Peter Dennis. As the Town Councillor for Westcott East, I have been approached by residents of Montague Park expressing their concerns over the road infrastructure. Indeed, they came to this council to speak about it in September 2019. The concerns are ultimately about the safety of pedestrians, especially the pupils of the Floriat School. While the roads and associated street furniture have been designed to some standard anticipated traffic flow, it is important to note that once a system is used, the designs and layout need to be reviewed and associated fixes taken. Small examples: a metal barrier on the exit by the school. The reason it is not there, apparently, the claim that the path is not 2 meters wide. Untrue, and indeed, if it is a width issue, the school fence could be moved. The crossing that is not a crossing. I observed this on Tuesday morning during school drop-off. It is a heavily used crossing point, more so than the one further up. This presents a problem as traffic has no indicators that there is actually a crossing. I noticed 2 speeding delivery vans and cars not giving way. These are young children crossing this point. This is an accident waiting to happen. Footpaths that allow for cars and vehicles to traverse them. Photographic evidence has been sent in to WBC. Traffic being on the wrong side of the road. This one is a particular personal one to me, as I just missed being knocked off my bike by a car cutting a corner into Windsor Crescent. This petition asks for the council to undertake a complete review of the issues, engage with the community to seek their views and take the appropriate action at all times, keeping the residents up to date. As a side note, the communication for the Westcott Road resurfacing via Facebook group was an excellent communication medium. Thank you.
Thank you. When we'll go through the presentations of them all, and you also obviously will need to, well, they'll be handed into Democratic Services and passed to the appropriate officers. But if we now move on to Councillor Rachel Burgess, who will present a petition, and she can speak for 3 minutes now.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Unfortunately, due to unforeseen circumstances, Councillor Nick Fox is unable to be here this evening to present this petition, so I'm presenting the petition on Councillor Fox's behalf. Right. Councillor Fox's petition calls on Woking Borough Council to install 2 pedestrian crossings, first on Rectory Road in Woking near the Waitrose site, and second on Wiltshire Road in Woking between Crutchley Road and Bishop's Drive. The petition has 71 paper signatures and 74 online signatures. The paper signatures, is worth noting, were collected entirely by scores of local residents actually taking the time and making the effort to walk to Nick Fox's house and push the reply slip through his front door. So there clearly is considerable support for the crossings at both these locations. And the other thing to mention that's really striking with this petition is the individual comments that people have made on the petition. So over and over again, residents are making the same kind of points. So that the traffic is too fast, the roads are not safe to cross, that the roads are treated as ring roads or bypasses with no consideration to pedestrians by the drivers, that there have been near misses where residents or someone they know has narrowly escaped an accident, and people have commented on their fear that an accident will happen soon. People have also noticed the increase in traffic over recent years, thus making the roads more dangerous, and there's obviously the fear that current and future house building will only increase traffic volumes and make the roads even harder to cross. The idea of pedestrian crossings in these 2 areas has also been supported by the Planning and Transport Committee of Woking Town Council. To conclude then, we know that we need to be encouraging people to walk as much as possible. But to do that, people must be free from the worry that their walk will involve a dangerous crossing. We must put pedestrians first. Mr. Mayor, when you forward this petition to officers, please could I ask then that all the officers read all the comments the petitioners have made. And Mr. Mayor, you yourself are a Norreys ward councillor, so you must know the strength of feeling on this issue. Now, I'm just presenting this petition tonight, but the people that you really must listen to are the residents in this part of Norreys. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burgess. The next one is Maria G, please. Would you like to speak about your petition for 3 minutes?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My petition is about a police station and more police on the streets in Wokingham. The petition that I'm presenting this evening is on behalf of myself, Wokingham Town Councillors Anna Box and Pete Dennis, and more than 500 residents of Wokingham petition demanding that action be taken. People in Wokingham Town are fed up with the increasing vandalism in the town. We miss having a local police station and an obvious police presence in the town, particularly at night. Fewer police on the streets and the lack of a station makes criminals more confident they will not be caught, resulting in more opportunistic crime. The vandalism to the Wokingham Town Centre Christmas tree, the theft or vandalism of CCTV systems, and antisocial behaviour and drug taking in our parks are examples of vandals and criminals thinking they can act without being caught. Over the last 10 years, police numbers were cut nationally by 20,000 and local police stations closed. One of the casualties of police station closures is Wokingham Town Centre. If police numbers are going to be restored, then the residents of Wokingham Town should be the beneficiaries of this. We recognise and welcome the recent action and meeting by officers with residents in Howard Palmer Gardens. And with a local police station, we believe the problems that occurred there would more easily be nipped in the bud. We're intending to present this petition, as well as to the Wokingham Town Council, to the Right Honourable Priti Patel MP, to the Right Honourable John Redwood MP, and to John Campbell and Anthony Stansfeld, who I'm very pleased to see here tonight, the Chief Constable and the Thames Valley Police and Crime Commissioner, respectively. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Councillor G. And finally, on this list, we go to Councillor Andy Croy, who has a petition, and he has 3 minutes also, starting now.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My petition reads, Wokingham Borough Council, please plan to fund free school meals through the Christmas holidays. The petition has 483 signatures and was collected entirely online, with all the signatories living in the borough. I have to say that the speed with which the signatures were collected was the fastest I've ever seen. It's only the restrictions imposed on us by COVID-19 that stopped a far higher number of people from signing the petition. When we started the petition, the Conservatives were prevaricating over whether or not that children should, in receipt of free school meals, should be supported in the Christmas holidays. Since then, there have been 2 important developments. Firstly, the Borough Council has been allocated more than enough cash to support these families. Secondly, the borough has been given the freedom to choose exactly how this support is provided. I understand the borough is currently considering the use of food vouchers as a way to provide support to free school meal children. And now there's a hierarchy, isn't there, of how we ensure people are fed. I guess at our most basic level, we have soup kitchens. There's a level above that where we have collections from a food bank. And there's a level above that where we have the provisioning of vouchers. And finally, at the top, we have the provision of cash. But one of the brilliant things about free school meals is that the dignity of the children can be preserved. One of the problems with vouchers is that the dignity of the family is placed at risk. I've taken the liberty of asking the manager of Wokingham Food Bank, Annette Medhurst, what she thinks. She said, cash is the best way forward to support struggling households. There is dignity in the household being able to choose from their own food and where it can be brought from. As well as dignity denied to our families, there are difficulties of using vouchers. Will the vouchers be spendable in small shops, which are far closer to many of our residents than supermarkets? Will the vouchers be allowable for online deliveries? Will the parent need a printer to print it out or a smartphone for it to be scanned? These are just some of the issues that can surround vouchers. Vouchers are clearly better than no vouchers, but they do not give parents the choice and dignity of cash. By trying to invent some sort of Wokingham Borough voucher, we risk a lot of effort being put into developing a tool to replicate something that cash already does. The point of the borough response and our planning must be to give families not just food, but to give families all the dignity we would wish for our own families. So please, let's not just plan to fund free school meals through the holidays. Let's plan to do it with the maximum dignity affordable to our families. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Croy. And that is the end of the petition submissions. Thank all of you for delivering your explanations and summarising them, which I believe have already been sent to Democratic Services and will now be passed to the appropriate officers. We now move on to agenda item 67, which is a presentation by the Chief Constable and the Police and Crime Commissioner. So I would like to introduce Chief Constable John Campbell, Chief Constable of Thames Valley Police, and Anthony Stansfeld, the Police and Crime Commissioner, and invite them both to make their presentation. I'm assuming they're logged in somewhere.
You've actually got Matthew Barber this evening, Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner.
Okay.
Volunteer with the presentation. I'll happily join in with any questions later.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Barber.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. John Campbell here from Thames Valley.
Evening, Chief Constable. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, I understand we've got about 20 minutes or so for a presentation, about 10 for questions. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. I'm joined also by your local superintendent, Felicity Parker. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the force issues, and then Felicity's got a number of slides talking about some of the local issues, and then obviously allow for questions. Now, my staff officer should have the presentation that she should be sharing now. That's great. Thank you, Becca. So first of all, thank you for the invite. It's a pity we can't see each other in person. Let's hope next year feels and looks very different.
It'll be a virtual greeting and departure then.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Next slide, please. Since we last met, so I took over in 2019, the April, and we had benefit at that time from additional funding from Precept from Mr. Stansfeld, the Crime Commissioner. And the priorities for me at the time were local policing, which is local policing that you experienced, that 24/7 policing that Felicity is in charge of locally, investigations and call handling. Next slide, please. What we did, or what I asked to be done, was a restructuring of the local policing model, which meant that we had a different shift pattern, which put more officers on patrol, particularly on nights, which is relevant in particular for nighttime economy, and sometimes where we have some parts of the community, in particular our rural communities as well. We did see a welcome increase in arrests during that year, and also stop and search increased considerably. Stop and search is an important tool. We need to do it properly and treat people with dignity and respect, but it's an important tool for preventing crime and also drugs possession. Next slide, please. Restructured our crime departments, and I returned a number of detectives back to Felicity locally, and she'll touch on that a little bit later. And we've certainly increased the amount of training in around our what we call volume crime investigation. So we have very specialised units that deal with murders, organised crime, fraud and cyber, and then we have local detectives dealing with the things that affect people most locally. And I'm very pleased to say that compared to this time last year, outcomes, which is the new word for detections, is up some 24%, which is pretty encouraging. Not stop there, I want plenty more, and that is around about year on year across the force, around 3,000 victims of crime that got a better result and a little bit of justice. Thank you. Next slide. 101 was an issue for us in 2018. It's less of an issue for us now. I think people still regard 101 as having some of those historic problems. The average at the time during the summer of 2018, which is a particular hotspot for us, was around about 8 minutes, which is terrible, quite frankly. And that was a combination of increased workloads, weather, hot, balmy summer, football events, a lot of drinking, but we also had staffing issues, which is my problem, not anybody else's. We've resolved that now, and as you can see, we're now down to, on average, around about 2 minutes, often quite quicker than that. The 999 system is very robust, and the average call handling time is about 7.6 seconds. We take about 1.3 million calls a year from members of the public, and we will always try and protect the nines, because that's one where risk and people in crisis are. But certainly an improvement in 101, but I want to get that down as the months and years progress. Thank you. Next slide. And as you can see, that's the green peak, which was the summer in 2018, and you can see that was the time to answer, and we've improved. And as you see, peaked again on the right hand side, that's the COVID peak, I'll touch on that in a minute, and then you'll see that it's down to some pretty reasonable levels. Thank you. Next slide. Next slide, please. Thank you. Online reporting. This is something we've been pushing because it does help with our call handling. And a number of the members of the public don't actually want to speak to anybody. They're quite happy to report incidents and crime online. So you'll see this time last year we're at 21,000, and this year that's gone up to 66,000. My job is to make sure that the service we give to online reporting is what you would get if you were speaking to people face to face, and that's very important for me. Next slide, please. Thank you very much for your kind words of support and condolence at the time of Andrew Harper's death last year. We had the trial into the unlawful killing of Andrew over the summer, and 3 men were found guilty. They are appealing their sentences. They're saying that those sentences were too harsh for manslaughter, and the Crown is appealing the sentence on the basis that they felt the sentences were too lenient. So we await the outcome of that Court of Appeal hearing at some time, we think, before Christmas. But again, thank you for your support following his death. The family and my officers much appreciate it. Thank you. Black Lives Matter and other protests. Well, it's been a very busy summer for a number of protests across the Thames Valley, and you'll see over the summer till the end of October, we had 126 different protests and demonstrations. A number of those, 49 of those, were related to Black Lives Matter. And you'll appreciate, after the terrible killing of George Floyd, there was a great deal of concern from a wide breadth of the community, and certainly a number of protests. They were, by and large, completely peaceful across the Thames Valley, and I'm very pleased to see that, with people making their feelings felt about this important matter. It's not lost on me that sometimes people's feeling of injustice and discrimination goes beyond the criminal justice system and is in other areas, both employment and education and health and such matters. But of course, we are the very focal point of that when my officers are at protest. What we have done, and we continue to do, and Felicity might touch on this later, but where we've had protesters that have been protested against with a particular concern about police bias or discrimination, we've asked them to join some of our advisory groups, and that's happening across the force. So those people that are most concerned can be part of our critical friends in the community that hold a mirror up to us about how we police their communities, and hope collectively to get better with a little bit understanding of some of the issues for policing, but likewise the impact we can have on certain groups in the community. Thank you. I would point this out. This doesn't particularly affect Berkshire. This is HS2. This is the train line going through the force area. We have the largest footprint in Buckinghamshire and Oxfordshire of any force in the country around HS2. The anticipated finish time is 2030, and we know sometimes that projects don't go always according to plan. Significant protest issues for us, and over the last month or so I've had to mobilise the force on 4 occasions to get officers from across the force area to deal with spontaneous protests, and some of which the violence is very specific against my officers. So we had 7 officers assaulted a few weeks ago when they had human waste thrown at them, and also one of my officers who was in a cherry picker trying to get a protester down. That protester thought it was wise to remove all the hydraulic pipes from the cherry picker, and you can obviously see the threat that presented to my officer. So this is something that's with us. I mention it because obviously I sometimes have to abstract officers from the local areas in Berkshire to support those policing operations. We will try and recover costs where we can from government and minimise the impact locally, but it's something that's a reality that I have to deal with. Thank you. Operation Venetic, this is just a national crime agency operation. We had a significant footprint in Berkshire as well. This is where a foreign crime agency managed to decrypt some of the codes that some of our organised crime groups were using, and there was a number of successes across the Thames Valley. We have a trial in December for the first OCG, organised crime group, that we caught and found in possession of drugs and money. So a successful operation. Next slide, please. Forbury Gardens, well, you'll appreciate not so far away in Reading, the tragic events of the 21st of June. Again, I mean, I mentioned this for reference because of the impact on the force, because it was a significant abstraction, given that the scene itself, we had to have a number of officers for a long time, over almost like, I think, 9 days in the end. The offender, Sadala, has pleaded guilty last week to 3 counts of murder, 3 counts of attempt murder. He will be sentenced after another hearing in December. But again, my thanks for all the words of support from members of the community and councillors regarding our response to that, and also the impact on our friends and colleagues in Reading. Thank you. Next slide, please. Operation Restore is our operation name for our COVID response. We first were involved in COVID. Seems a terribly long time ago now. 31st of January, when the UK nationals were being repatriated from Wuhan. They flew into Brize Norton in Oxfordshire, and we had to then support them returning to Merseyside and then Milton Keynes for quarantine. Next slide, please. The challenge really for policing has been to not only maintain our core services, and there is a question around that from one of the councillors, but also to do some degree of enforcement in terms of protecting health and the NHS. The strategy has been always to engage and explain and encourage where we can, but on occasion we will enforce. And the vast majority of people are entirely compliant with the rules. There was a little bit of confusion. I think we would all accept that over the summer. A little bit more clarity now, and certainly we are starting to enforce a little bit more over the recent weeks on this current lockdown. Next slide, please. You'll see this is a sense of what's going on in the Wokingham area. There's no such thing as a COVID crime. This is where the word COVID has been mentioned in some degree of crime. It could be that someone's coughed at somebody or said they've got COVID, or it could be something related to it. So that's just an indicator, if you like. Incidents you'll get a sense of. So we've dealt with 37,000 incidents of COVID-related reports to us, attended 11,800. 539 of those are in Wokingham. So you get a sense of that additional workload that we've been dealing with. And we issued in the first wave of lockdown 870 tickets. Of those, 8 were in Wokingham. The vast majority of those tickets were issued to men, about 80% or so, and then the vast majority of those were for age groups between 18 and 25, and that was largely young men going around in cars together when they were breaching the rules without any lawful excuse. So that fits, unfortunately, the profile of an awful lot of our crime in terms of age groups. Thank you. Next slide. Next slide, please. Assaults on officers. I reference this just to give some context so that everyone can be aware of what your and my officers are engaged with. So we have seen a 22% increase on the previous year in terms of assaults. You'll see 31 of those are in Wokingham, and also a number of my officers and your officers were spat at. What we have seen during COVID is an increase in that threat to officers. I'm pleased to say that the courts have supported the prosecutions and the sentencing, and every one of those that were found in court and convicted by the courts got between 4 and 6 weeks in prison. So that was certainly a message that was sent out early on by the courts, and my thanks to them. Next slide, please. We are benefiting from additional officers. There is a question in there. Bracknell and Wokingham as a general area will get an additional 17 officers out of the 183 that we're getting in the first wave. We hope the second wave will come, but of course we're all a little bit nervous about COVID budget and the impact on all of us in public services, and no doubt you'll be the same. I'm very pleased to say that in our first wave of recruitment, it's an area we want to get better at. We had 23% of our applicants were from a black, Asian, minority ethnic background, which is certainly higher, and that reflects the amount of work we've been putting into this across the Thames Valley. And we do have a positive action team made up of black and Asian officers who are helping us communicate better with certain communities, encourage applications, and give a sense of what it's like to be an officer from a minority ethnic background working for the police in the Thames Valley, and give a positive account of that experience. Thank you. That's just a little slide that shows the confidence data. So all things considered, taking everything into account, the green line is Thames Valley, the blue line is forces that are quite similar to us because we get grouped in different forces. No point comparing Thames Valley to a force like Dorset because of scale and size and urban versus rural. And the yellow line is the national average. So you can see that we're quite higher than others. It's still too low for me. I'd love us to be in the 90s in terms of confidence in the police, but you'll see that we are doing better than some. Thank you. Okay, I'll hand over now to Felicity, your local police commander, who will talk through 2 or 3 slides about what's going on locally.
Thank you, Chief Constable.
Thank you very much. Yes, I just want to give you some insight to a little bit more around the local response to serving the community. The first thing I wanted to highlight is the positive action we are taking around domestic abuse. This is our #1 priority for the officers and staff on the local police area. We have had, you'll see in the data around our arrest rate and our outcomes, but we are arresting more people. We are holding more people to account in courts as well, which means that risk around domestic abuse is reducing, and hopefully less crimes are taking place around that, making people much safer. The Chief Constable talked about the new structures, and we've been really fortunate because previously we didn't have a CID team of detectives on the local police area. So we now have one. Not only does that mean we have extra expertise to help with some of those more complex investigations, but it also means we are much more linked in with the neighbourhood teams. The investigators, the detectives are getting much to understand the local criminals, and also we were able to take much more proactive action around them. Talking of proactive action, I wanted to highlight one of our really good operations which happened last year, Operation Oedipus, and this was around drug dealing around Class A and Class B. And we were concerned around this because we had an understanding that children were being dealt to. So we had a significant operation where people were arrested and held to account, and the trial is up and coming. But not only does this hold those people to account, but it sends that message that we don't tolerate that. We work in partnership to make sure that it's a resistant area for drug dealing in the Wokingham Borough. Next slide, please. Thank you. I put a lot of words on here, so hopefully you're able to read them as well. But we've had a significant impact on burglaries this year. Yes, COVID has helped, but we have had a 56% reduction in burglary, which is the top in the force. The two examples here are where we've gone after organised criminals who are cross-border coming into the Wokingham Borough area. They have committed significant offences. The first one is 14 offences, the second one is 42 offences, not all in Wokingham Borough, but we've managed to identify them, pick out the series and get them convicted as well. So we also tackle the local offenders, and that's where our neighbourhood team really come into play. They work with around offender management to stop them committing these offences in the first place, and also good messaging on social media, getting out into the geographical areas to make sure people are feeling safe, and do a lot of proactive work around that as well. Next slide, please. In addition to that, some more information there. Extra proactive work, and it's not just about drug supply, it's also about protecting those who are most vulnerable in our community, tackling street robbery, dealing with a lot of ASB and reducing the effect that has on the community. We've also done some more work around our rural crime. I was out with the team last week on the border down in Hampshire as well with Wokingham Borough, to make sure that we are doing some disruption work, supporting those who feel isolated as well. We've got some other officers who are now focusing specifically on rural crime, so that should make a difference. We have a new police point in Arborfield. As you know, a significant amount of housing is there, so we've got that touch point so we can have some officers more locally based to serve that new community. We're also working with the local council, particularly Carol Camus, who's been a great champion around the violence reduction unit, and we're working to see how we can get that public health approach, which means how can we work much more closely together to get earlier upstream around stopping serious violence becoming the norm, and we're in a good place with that, and some really good things which are in the pipeline, particularly around schools. Mr. Campbell mentioned about the advisory group. I've been engaging with those who organised the Black Lives Matter protest in Wokingham, and we really want to reach out and get a good dialogue with our minority groups within the community. Next month we have our first independent advisory group, which is just focusing on our Black and minority ethnic background community, which is a really positive step. So hopefully that will be fruitful for everyone. I've also reinvigorated the independent advisory group for Wokingham Borough as well. Got some new people there who are really enthused to make sure that we're listening to the community and serving them as best as possible. Next slide, please. So a couple of figures here. As I mentioned, really proud of the work we've done on residential burglaries, and also there's good reductions there on other types of crime as well. The middle section says about crimes of concerns. It does highlight that domestic incidents are up, and some of that is around our crime recording, but we have been concerned throughout the COVID period about how we can protect those who are at risk of domestic abuse. But please pay attention that we've also increased our outcomes by 129%. That's because of the focus we've done, and I will continue to make sure that's a priority for me and my teams moving forward. It is concerning that the shed breaks and garage breaks are up nearly up by 48% there. This is a difficult crime to investigate because we get very little information about it, forensics and witnesses, etc. So we do need to make sure that we do a lot more prevention work on that, and it's something we can look at with the CSP. And finally, yes, our outcome rates are up 39%. So we are holding many more people to account, whether it's at a lower level, but we are still making sure that people are being held to account for what has taken place, which is obviously a really good thing for the victims as well. It's an area I want to continue to improve on, and there's more work to be done. But there's some good work there as well around the violence with injury and sexual offences. Next slide.
Thank you, Fitty. Final slide from me, Mr. Mayor, and this relates to some of the challenges to come. So I talked about the welcome benefit of additional officers that we're getting from government. And as I say, we hope that's going to continue, notwithstanding the budget issues over COVID. But we still, as a force, have to save £13.4 million over the next 3 years. And unfortunately, the uplift of officers is ring-fenced, so I have no option. It's a wonderful problem to have an increase in officers, but apart from that, the rest of the force has to find £30.5 million, and that's a minimum, we think, given the unknown impact of COVID budgets. I will leave it there, Mr. Mayor, and obviously happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Chief Constable. Is your colleague on the PCC going to speak before we do questions in case they go into across the two of you, or do you want to do your questions first?
I haven't got any additional presentation, but I'm quite happy to take any specific questions or any answers to questions to the Chief.
Okay, so it's an open question across the boundary then. Thank you. I have a list of names here. The first person for the question is Councillor Pauline Jorgensen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Chief Constable, and thank you very much, Felicity, for the presentation. It's really interesting. And I'd also like to just thank all your officers for their support and for what they have to put up with, which is quite astonishing when you heard the presentation. And especially the local police, in my case in Early, but also in Wokingham, who've been very helpful. So to the question, during the last few months, we've experienced increasing antisocial behaviour, vandalism, criminal damage, doorstep thefts and car racing across the borough. Particularly, we've seen an increase in Early, where there's also been instances of criminals using COVID face masks to make them unrecognisable on CCTV. Last week, for example, we had a football pitch in my ward vandalised, the goalpost broken and nearby houses egged. I would like to know whether the police recognise this increase in antisocial behaviour in the stats, what plans you have to deal with it, and if there's anything we can do as a council to help.
Thank you very much, Councillor. If I can hand over to Fitty, and she'll be able to give you a response to this.
Yeah, thank you very much for your question. So the statistics don't show a particular increase in antisocial behaviour around the amount of reports that we have. Early has shown an actual drop in the last 12 months. And overall, there's been a drop of 7% of ASB within the Wokingham Borough. But when I speak to my local teams, they are absolutely aware of some of those issues that you have raised, Councillor, and we have been prioritising them. For example, in Halloween, we had 20 PCs out and PCSOs. We stop checked 45 people. We made 3 arrests, and we used our dispersal powers as well. So we are aware of some of those things that have been taking place. Over the summer, we have had difficulties with our resourcing because we've had to prioritise our 999s and 101s. So our neighbourhoods have suffered somewhat, but there we are now absolutely back to the usual strength of our numbers, and we are looking to see how we can better serve. We have got our subgroup of our community safety partnership, which does the problem solving. We work really well with the ASB officer. In fact, the ASB officer used to be one of my officers, and she was a PCSO, and we gifted her for a short time until you've recruited her permanently, because it works so well to make sure that we are solving ASB at the lowest possible level, as well as with us. I suppose my plea is, if our crime recording doesn't reflect how you feel in the community, then I do need you to report it either through to Wokingham Borough Council or through to 101, because once we've got that good understanding of the data, we've got a much better argument to put our resources where needed. But yes, we are aware of those, and hopefully you will see our officers tackling what needs to be done. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next person to question is Councillor Clive Jones.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, and I'd like to add my thanks to Chief Constable and to Felicity, and specifically request that you pass on thanks to all of your officers, especially those in Early and Wokingham and Woodley, and the villages around our borough. So my question, Chief Constable, is we've heard that the government plan to recruit another 20,000 new police officers. What measures have been put in place by Thames Valley Police to recruit our share of this number. When we last saw your predecessor, we heard from him that Thames Valley Police had a shortfall of about 150 officers. This didn't include any officers to replace those that had been cut in the previous 4.5 years. Can you tell us how many officers we need to recover from those cuts? And the final part of the question is, how many officers will retire in the next 5 years? These three figures added together will give us a necessary recruitment number for the next few years. Do you know what it is? And how do you expect to be able to undertake the recruitment? And had the Home Office confirmed you'll have the cash to be able to do this?
Thanks,
Apologies
Councillor.
for a very long question.
No, it's okay. Thanks. And first of all, thanks for your question. Secondly, thanks for your kind comments about the officers. We'll make sure that gets passed on. So the simple answer is that around the additional officers, 183 is definitely confirmed. That's the ones I touched on in my presentation. We would assume, and we're hoping for, around 450 additional officers over what we normally have. Which again is very welcome. They have to be recruited, as you know, and the recruitment process can take up to 9 months, and then they have a 2-year training program as a minimum. So there's a time before they become operationally effective. But certainly in the first wave, in addition to the officers that Wokingham has, and Bracknell is one local policing area that we have as a unit, Felicity is going to get an extra 17 officers on top of her current numbers. In terms of you mentioned about we were 150 short, I'm pleased to say actually we're about 120 over now. We've had a big recruitment campaign. What we need to do is make sure we've got enough officers for the budget, if that makes sense. So we have to manage that throughout the year. But very pleased to say that we are now well ahead of our recruitment target for that first 183. No concerns around that. And then secondly, in terms of your observations around retirement, well, we plan a little bit around retirement. Officers can retire on 30 years, but of course a lot depends on what they may go on to. So who knows what the COVID budget and the COVID economy will do around that. But around about 628 officers we would expect to lose over the next 5 years or so as normal retirements. But that doesn't mean people can't leave us anyway before they get to retirement age. I would say, Councillor, for the first time in a long time, we are healthier than we have been. It won't make up for the numbers that we've lost over the last 8 or 9 years. So we lost about 700 police officers over the last 8 or 9 years and 900 police staff. But the additional funding that we received from government last year is very welcome, and we're hopeful and I'm pretty confident that those 20,000 pledges will be met. We've heard nothing to the contrary.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Councillor.
Thanks. So, Councillor Rochelle Shepherd-Dubay, you're next in line. Are you there?
My question is, how has the pandemic affected police availability, especially since you had government cuts to the size of your force, which we've already discussed apparently several times? And are you being stretched by having to enforce the lockdown?
Thanks, Councillor. The simple answer is, yeah, we're being stretched a bit. In the first wave of lockdown, what we saw was significant change in the way the community are acting. So we didn't have a nighttime economy. Everything was shut down. And so you'll see some of the crime figures and incidents drop significantly. We then started to see a build-up in COVID-type incidents. So almost our workloads were replaced by COVID incidents. And as I say, over the summer, we've had about 38,000 additional calls around COVID. But we've weighed that off against less calls around our normal crime and some of our normal patrol activity because there's less going on in the community. But we then have the enforcement piece as well. So there's been a little bit of equaling out across the two. What we have to do as well is, in terms of prioritisation, we have to make sure that we're protecting our core services, because at the start of COVID, we had up to 30% of our workforce that were off or self-isolating. Now, thankfully, that's only 6%. So we have been able to manage resilience pretty well, and we are still meeting our response times generally, and we're still, obviously, as you've heard from Felicity, and my observations, that we are still doing an awful lot of proactive work. So I'm very confident at the moment that we're managing it well. We need to keep an eye on protecting our officers from COVID, because anytime they go ill, that's an impact on their patrol capability and investigative capability of the community. But I would say I've been very pleased with the way that the force has responded to the challenges of COVID, and let's hope it's over for everybody sooner rather than later.
And we do appreciate all of the blue light services and all of the work you're putting in and the extra effort you're putting in to make sure we're all safe.
Thanks, Councillor. Appreciate that.
Thank you. And the next person to speak is Councillor Jim Fruin, please.
My question was to do with how COVID has affected your policing priorities, which I think you've just answered. So I'd just take this opportunity to say thank you and ask if you could please get the cadets up and going again as soon as possible. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. We'd love to get our cadets back. It's that balance between, groups coming together. I would say, in respect of the question, what we did do in particular over the summer was give a lot of focus on domestic abuse. So we knew that people that were victims were stuck and isolated in their houses. So we set up an operation where we were proactively going and visiting victims of domestic abuse who had repeatedly reported to us previously. So they might not be reporting to us now, but we were sending officers proactively to knock the door and check they were okay. There's a balance to be struck around that strategy, because you don't want to make things worse for people who have come through some tricky times, or, if you like, create a problem with the offender then when we go away. But it's worked very well. We didn't come across too much crime, thankfully, but what we did see was a lot of reassurance. What we have seen, as Felicity talked about, is that we have seen since COVID an increase in domestic violence. We often associate increases with general challenges in society. When people are feeling stressed, they sometimes lash out and become violent within the family household. Unacceptable as it is, we do see a pattern of behaviour when things get tough, certainly unemployment, etc., etc. So we will keep a close eye on that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your brief question also, Councillor Fruin. Next week is Councillor Lindsay Ferris, please. If we can keep some of them brief. Councillor Ferris.
Good evening, Chief Constable Felicity and Barbara. Good evening. My question is, over the pandemic period, there has been a significant increase in domestic abuse across the country. How has Thames Valley Police managed this issue during this period, and what additional resource do you think needs to be provided both by Thames Valley Police and other parties, including Wokingham Borough Council? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Well, I think you heard about one of the operations that we did, where we were visiting victims of domestic abuse who had previously reported to us but weren't. We've seen domestic abuse go up around 21% compared with this time last year, so definitely increasing. The wicked problem with domestic abuse is that we know it's terribly underreported. So what we do want to do is encourage reporting. We have in place performance measurement around the number of arrests we have for domestic violence offenders, and also the speed at which we get to domestic violence incidents as well. Because what we know is the sooner we can get to victims, we have, in effect, increased commitment to the criminal justice outcome, which is our world. We work very closely with local authorities, and certainly Felicity would report that the relationship with Wokingham in terms of adult and children safeguarding is strong, which is very encouraging, and great partnership. And I would say that on top of the local response and the local investigations, we also have obviously our domestic violence abuse teams who deal with the high risk and the medium risk offending as well. I would always say there's more to do. Domestic violence is a key area of work for us in terms of the volumes of reports that we go to across the force. I think it's about 80 a day we go to across the whole force. And often, the complexities of domestic violence are difficult to unravel for my police officers. They can deal with the policing issue and the enforcement of the law, but we know generally that kind of diversion from violence and the support to often the women in the community who are predominantly the victims is very much a partnership approach. So I think that joint partnership working, that assessment of risk, that diversion. We do also have an operation with the schools, so that if any of the teachers have a concern about any child that might be talking about or exhibiting kind of like evidence that there's been some form of domestic violence within the household, we have a reporting mechanism both with the local authority and also to us as well.
Thank you, Chief Constable.
Thank you.
And the last person to ask a question will be Councillor Gregor Murray, if we can keep them as as sharp as we can as the last question. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, and thank you for the presentations tonight and for your service. I'm particularly pleased to hear about the campaign that you're taking against domestic violence. I was going to ask about antisocial behaviour, but as that's already been covered, I wonder if I can ask a question about drug use. I've had a number of residents complain to me during the COVID period about recreational drug use of their neighbours, and particularly about the little metal cans that we keep seeing in parks and gutters and public spaces. Has there been an increase in recreational drug use, particularly during COVID? And if so, what can we do about it?
Thanks, Councillor. I'll talk from a force perspective, and then Felicity might want to come in from a local point of view. It's difficult to know is a simple answer about recreational drug use. What we did know that during the first wave of COVID with lockdown, some of the people that were supplying drugs couldn't do their trade because, one, if they were coming from outside the area, they couldn't travel, and secondly, if they were local dealing, then obviously there was an impact on their ability to get out and meet whoever might be buying their drugs. It's interesting that you quite rightly use the term recreational drug users, because across the area we will have those that are habitual drug users that in effect are drug addicts and therefore have drugs on a consistent basis and then need to sometimes feed their habit through criminality, and I think we're all quite familiar with that picture. But where we have people who are recreational users, they are just as much to blame for and responsible for the county drug lines and the drug dealing in our communities, because if people weren't buying the stuff, the drug dealers wouldn't be in our communities. So I would encourage anybody that is, of influence, councillors, members of the community alike, to almost, we need to start having that conversation that says there can't be almost this, if you like, passive association that it's just recreational drug use. I know that wasn't what you meant by your term, but people who do and take drugs in that way are part of the violence and the exploitation of the drugs market. And I think sometimes people don't quite see that as they go about what they believe is something that they know to be unlawful, but somehow they justify to themselves. Felicity, from a local point of view, do you have a view on the drug dealing and the drug use within Wokingham?
Yeah, hopefully within the presentation you would have seen that we have been taking significant action around the drug supply. It is a difficult balance, and we don't have, I only have a finite amount of resources, so I have to make sure they're prioritising where we can, and that's for the more serious offences. But we do, again, I chair the Community Safety Partnership in Wokingham Borough. We have that subgroup which is looking about drugs and addiction, and the partnership are looking at that. The neighbourhood teams are feeding in that and are part of that dialogue as well. It is everyone's responsibility, I think, to make sure that we have those right messages, as the Chief Constable said there, but also we're calling out and having that educational piece with young people and having a good dialogue as to how we can maybe solve these problems and highlight it to the significant impact it's putting in on particularly those young people.
Thanks. Just in terms of pure numbers, which don't tell the story, Councillor, it's like how people feel often is the case, that the number of drugs offences in terms of prosecutions and detections that we've had have actually gone up this year compared to last year, from 95 to 115. So that's a lot of the work that Felicity's been talking about. Thanks, Councillor.
Thank you, Chief Constable. And finally, those are the questions. So we've overrun quite a lot, but since Matt Barber very kindly donated his speaking time to more Q&As, I would just like to ask if he wants maybe 2 minutes maximum to summarise any points or make any points that he wasn't able to do earlier.
Oh, thank you very much. I think most of the questions have been aimed at operational policing, but I think, as you've heard this evening, there's some really good work being undertaken. I think a number of those concerns that councillors have raised this evening are being really well addressed, not just by the LPA, but also by the Violence Reduction Unit across Thames Valley, which seeks not only to tackle purely issues of violent crime, but also around drug use, which we've heard a lot of members mention. And people may well be aware of the Thames Valley Drug Diversion Scheme, which is being piloted by the Violence Reduction Unit, which looks to break that cycle of abusive use of recreational drugs. And I think so far the pilots that began in West Berkshire and Windsor and Maidenhead have been really successful. So that's being rolled out across Thames Valley, and we look to see the success of that in across the whole of the force area, but including Wokingham. And just this afternoon, I was with a meeting of community safety managers from across Thames Valley, including Wokingham, And it's really good to see the close partnership working both between the PCC's office, the Violence Reduction Unit, the force, and the councils, which I think is really starting to pay dividends in some of that problem-solving work.
Thank you, Mr. Barber. I thank both of you gentlemen for a very interesting presentation, and you answered lots of questions there. We did overrun a bit, but I think it was well worthwhile for the contributions made by you both. It's good of you to have taken your time to come and speak to us. We hope to have you back again sometime for a rerun of the approach, but with obviously different questions and status. And I'd also like to thank Superintendent Felicity Parker also for her participation in this presentation. So thank you to all three of you. Goodbye. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor. Good night, everybody.
Right.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Thanks. Good night.
Good night.
Right. That was an interesting agenda item. We now move on to agenda item 68, which is changes to the Constitution. And I understand, Councillor Stewart Monroe, I believe you are going to propose this report. Is that correct?
That is true, Mr. Mayor. I think it was the first constitutional review working group I attended, and this one can be summarised by the points on page 43 of the agenda on the items that are really sensible tidying up items of various ideas about attending and to really fit into the times that we are now in, sort of attendance of meetings and recordings and things, etc. So it's fairly straightforward tidying up of the way things are in reality. And so I'm happy to propose these changes.
Thank you, Councillor Monroe. Do you have a seconder?
I do.
Could you tell me who it is, please?
John Halsall.
John Halsall. Yes, I've heard of that name. Yes, thank you. So, Councillor Monroe, then you can, as the proposer, have up to 3 minutes to speak on this. Would you like to take that or start doing that now, please?
I'll reserve my right to speak at the end if necessary, please, Mr. Mayor. In the interest of time.
Okay, well, you're the proposer. It's normally the seconder who would have the option.
Okay.
So would you like to speak?
Go where we are. As I said in the beginning, this really is about tidying up procedures in line with the circumstance we find ourselves today. So, for example, attendance of meetings and the recording of people attending meetings, etc., etc. Fairly straightforward things. I don't think there's any, and also in line with the times regarding the procurement piece. So I don't think there's anything that should be in any way not understood by anybody or in any way difficult for them to agree to. We certainly had a fairly robust discussion at the review meeting, which was including ourselves and the opposition, and I think we came to fairly straightforward agreement and listened to each other's ideas and amended the suggestions accordingly. So I'm very happy with what's been proposed, and would commend it to the council.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Monroe. Councillor Halsall, do you wish to speak as the seconder? Do you wish to speak now or reserve your right to speak later?
Reserve my right to speak later, sir.
Okay, thank you. In which case, just a moment, I just need to go and check something, if I may. Anyone else wish to speak now, please?
Mr. Mayor, yes, my hand is up. Stephen Conway.
Okay, Stephen Conway. Would you like to speak? Yes, please. Now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Stuart said most of this is just ordinary tidying up and pretty uncontentious, but I do have a couple of concerns. The first really relates to my feeling that it's rather unfair to effectively now move to a position where an assiduous councillor who attends meetings that when he's not a committee member out of interest and to follow what's going on isn't now even going to be recorded as there. And that seems doubly unjust when you consider that some committee members who remain silent throughout and never contribute at all are obviously recorded as present. So that seems a little unjust on assiduous and hardworking councillors. I'm also uneasy, to be quite frank, that we've made it rather easier for councillors to vote twice on the same matter. So I do have some concern. Most of this is uncontentious, but I am concerned on those 2 points.
Thank you. And there's another hand up as well. Andy Croy. And then there's another, yes, and Gary Cowan, both of those. So would one of you like to speak first? If are you ready, Andy Croy, to speak?
I can go. Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
We would like to request that we have split voting on this, because as a group, I think recommendations 2, 5 and 6 are not recommendations that we can agree with. Recommendation 2, which I think Stephen was just talking about, was the recording of attendance. And he talked about hardworking, assiduous councillors, and hopefully he's included me in that category, because in my first 2 years here, when I was the only Labour councillor, I could only ever attend committee meetings unofficially and have attendance recorded that way. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot from going to those meetings. So if other councillors want to attend other meetings and have that and learn and have their attendance recorded and have their residents see that they are turning up, then I think we should keep that. I appreciate there's an argument that we might not quite have been doing it properly now, but in that case, we should be writing the rules to say, yes, we will have, we will record members there. And more to that, we should be saying, actually, those members who want to are invited into the Teams meeting so they can see things in real life. In terms of point 5, the supplementary estimate, we did discuss this with Democratic Services, and we're not yet convinced that taking out the 500,000 actually increases the controls, because what it now says is that there are unlimited supplementary estimates. Now, it's not entirely clear what a supplementary estimate is. The way we've read it is that a supplementary estimate is an estimate to the budget. You know, the budget can be added to. Now, there were other controls later on in the Constitution which make clear you've got to stay within the budget, but supplementary estimates are outside of budget. So we're really unhappy with that one. And then number 6, in terms of substitutes, you know, every single committee where there's a Labour member, we've got one person. So that means we can only have one substitute. So that really puts a lot of pressure on us and increases the risk as us and all small groups of not being able to provide a member. I don't know why, because the bigger groups need this, so they need so many substitutes. I don't have a problem with that, but this is clearly going to impact the smaller substitutes. Finally, and I'll be very quick, number 8 means that we are going to refer to I think the Open Journal of the European Union. Now, I may be wrong, but I thought we'd gotten Brexit done. I thought we were no longer in thrall to the European Union and their fish stealing ways, but it seems that does continue. But on this one, we'll be channeling our inner Lib Dems, and we're raising concerns about it, but we will be voting for it because those numbers are sensible. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So from that, we will be going to Gary Cowan in a moment, but from what I've heard you say, it sounds like items 2, 5 and 6, you would like separate votes on those. Does that mean the others, 1, 3, 4, 7 and 8, we can vote, you're happy with those to vote on block?
You are correct.
Okay, so we'll do those 5 on block and the other 3 individually. And so Gary Cowan is next to speak. Councillor Gowan.
Okay, can you hear me, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, my camera doesn't seem to work. Stephen Conway stole my thunder and away. I picked up on 4.2.17. Record of attendance is the area I have difficulty with. Members regularly attend meetings where they are really interested in the issues being debated, and not because they've asked a question or are members of that committee. And that really is a trait in members that has to be admired. In addition, I believe it's right and proper for our residents who may wish to know how involved their elected members in the council get into the council business as it shows a real commitment to their roles and responsibilities. And not to record their involvement, I find very disappointing, and I can't support it for that particular reason. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Gowan. So at that point, then we can go on to the vote. And just a moment, please. I will silence myself. I'd turned over a page. Yes, Councillor Halsall is the seconder. He has the right to speak.
Thank you, Sam.
Councillor Halsall, I forgot you.
As is said, most of this is tidying up. The largest part of it is the local code of corporate governance, on which nobody seems to have any issues with, and the pure procurement business case is just indexing the limits, and is quite right that eventually we expect that to change. In terms of the current status quo is on the Constitution is that we don't record attendance of meetings, and I think that's quite right. Anybody now can attend a meeting, and on YouTube, and how do you know that people have attended meetings? Everybody can say they attended meetings, and what does it add to the knowledge of a councillor? On section 5, which is the 500k, this is a correction to amend the fact that we as an executive have to provide supplementary estimates for less than 500k, but don't for more than 500k, which is somewhat anomalous. And section 6, the substitutes, is completely correct that where substitutes exist in ONS committees, if you have a larger group, you should have a larger group of substitutes. So I think it's indefensible that the Conservative group has 2 substitutes and the Independents have 2 substitutes. It's getting the proportions right, and it's, I would say, more democratic. So I would recommend the amendments as put forward in the recommendations to the council, and to vote in favour of them. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Councillor Halsall. And finally then, Councillor Munro, would you like to have your right of reply?
Yes, please, Mr. Mayor. Just to say that I entirely agree with what Councillor Halsall said. I do understand the ambiguity of the OJU stuff, and you deal with that on a daily basis, Andy. So I can see we're not quite certain where we'll be with European Union stuff in the future. Hopefully, it will be resolved, as everybody's forecasting it might well be very quickly. I hold my breath and wait and see. As far as the other things concerned, we just thought it reasonable, as Councillor Halsall said, that if you watch it on YouTube, I mean, you could say you'd been to all these meetings, but you'd ever know at all. So I think, thanks for the input, but I think we went through this at the review meeting group, and I would recommend that to the council that this is a fair thing to do at this stage in the game. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Munro. Right, I apologise for missing out to Councillor Halsall a moment ago. It was on the previous page. I turned the page too early. We will now go on to the vote, and following the recommendations as set out in the report, and we will vote on recommendations 1, 3, 4, 7 and 8. We will vote for those on block, and then we will have separate votes for recommendations 2, 5 and 6. So we will now vote on that group of 1, 3, 4, 7 and 8 recommendations, and we will be doing this using the hands up facility on Teams. So I think most of you, if not all, should have the hands up capability, and as I go through, you put the hands up for the option that you have. Can we start off by ensuring that all hands are down, please? Every single hand is down. There's a couple still sitting up. There's one needs to go down. I can't see any hands sticking up, so I'm assuming that's good. Right. Anyone who wishes to vote for the recommendations, remember that's the group 1, 3, 4, 7 and 8. Please use the hands up feature now.
Mr. Mayor, it's Barry Patman. I haven't got the hands up feature, but I will be voting in favour.
Thank you. Okay, so that's a 4, and then plus.
Mr. Mayor, the same applies to Mr. Mayor. The same applies to myself, Simon Weeks.
Thank you. Just getting counted now. So can you all put your hands down again, please? So make sure everything's down for the next stage of the vote. Please take all your hands down. There's a few still there. Looks like good. They're all down. Okay. Anyone who wishes to vote against, please use the hands up feature now. Okay. So can you all put your hands down again, please? Make sure everyone's down. And now we come to the third one. Anyone who wishes to abstain, please use the hands up feature now. Okay. Just for the result, I had 2 people who said they didn't have the hand up and they gave me their vote. They were Simon Weeks and Barry Patman. I assume there are no others. Thank you. In that case, the recommendation is agreed. Thank you. We will now vote on the remaining 3, one at a time. So we'll be voting on recommendation 2. Can you all make sure? I think they are all down, but please make sure your hands are down. Yeah, it looks like it is. Okay, so anyone who wishes to vote for recommendation 2, please use the hands up feature now.
Mr. Mayor, same principle as the last one. I will be voting in favour as Barry Patman.
Nice, thank you. Barry Patman.
Same for Simon Weeks.
Okay, thank you. We're just checking the hands up for the moment for the 4.
Councillor Ross here. I've tried to raise my hand, but it doesn't seem to have operated. I wish to raise my hand.
Okay, so that's a 4 for Councillor Ross. Thank you. Okay, can you put all your hands down again, please? All of them down, please. Still several up. We are now going to ask anyone who wants to vote against to use the hands up feature now. if you are against. Okay. Can you all take your hands down now, please? All the hands down. And the third step then is what's left? Abstain. If you want to abstain in this vote for recommendation 2, please put your hands up now. Okay, so I'll just confirm the 3 names you gave us their vote verbally rather than by hand. Councillor Barry Patman, Simon Weeks and Angus Ross. And the recommendations, I'll just check, are agreed. Thank you. That's recommendation 2 done. We now vote for recommendation 5. So can you all ensure your hands are down? Very routine process, but it's we have to go through. Okay, I can't see any hands up. Good. If you wish to vote for recommendation 5, please use the hands up now.
Mr. Mayor, same principle again for this one item. In favour. Gary Patman.
You are for. Okay, thank you.
And for Simon Weeks, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. And Councillor Ross, are you doing the same thing, or is your hand up working?
You worked that time, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so that's done. That was the hands up 4, wasn't it? Yeah. Okay, make sure all the hands are down, please. And then if you're going to vote against, please, just a moment, please. And sorry for that, some hands were up and down. So we are now going to record those who wish to vote against recommendation 5. If you wish to vote against recommendation 5, please use your hands up feature now.
Mr. Mayor, just to say, I thought we'd already hit the against voting, so I mean to vote against this one. I thought we'd already hit against, to be honest.
Make sure. Yes, there was a moment of confusion about which hands were up and when they went down. So can I just check something? Right, can you take all the hands down then, please?
Mr. Mayor, I think I might have voted wrongly as well, because I thought we'd, like Andy, I thought you'd called for against, those voting against. Sorry, yes. Shirley Boyd speaking.
Yes, yes, you're against again. Yes, that'll be noted as against then, you say, or not? Are you voting for?
Yes,
or against?
Yeah, I was voting against, but I thought you'd called. The votes for came up. Then I thought we'd voted against, and then you called for against a second time. I thought.
Yes, that's because there was some confusion with hands going up and down. And
right. Okay. Well, I'm definitely an against. Thank you.
Yes, good. Sorry for that problem with hands up and down. Thank you. Okay, I've just been advised that to make sure we get this straight, could you put all your hands down and we will do the against again. Vote often, I think, is the moral here. but only at the right time. So are all your hands down? If you wish to vote against, please put your hands up now. And this is on recommendation 5. I think they've got those. So can you put all the hands down again, please? And the next one, the last one, is to do the abstains. If you wish to abstain against recommendation 5, please use the hands up now. Thank you. Okay, those recommendations are agreed, and we had the a couple of the councillors who gave their answers rather than the hands, and we've got those. So it's agreed. Recommendation 5 is agreed. We now move on to recommendation 6, and we're going to use the hands up facility again. So you know what to do. Can you please put all your hands down? On my screen, it shows that they're all down, but we're going to come. Okay, so on recommendation 6, then, anyone who wishes to vote for, please use the hands up feature now.
Mr. Mayor, same principle again. I'm voting in favour.
Okay, Barry Patton 4. The same.
Simon Weeks voting in favour.
Mr. Mayor, I think I have a problem. I want to vote for.
Okay, so that's Councillor Corinne Clark wants to vote for, and you're doing it verbally rather than with the hands up, okay?
Yes.
Good. Is there anyone else who wishes to do that? No? Okay. So that was the 4 vote. They're still being ticked. Okay. So hands down then, please. We're now going to do the next one, which is against. Sorry. Just a moment. Just checking that the hands are all down.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I didn't manage to get my hand up. I wish to vote for Angus Ross.
Councillor Ross, you are a 4.
Correct.
Yes, there's a few signals here. We're now going to do the against vote. I can't see any hands in the air on this one, so they are all down. Please make sure they are all down. And now, if you wish to vote for recommendation 8, sorry. Again.
No, against. We haven't had, Mr. Mayor, we haven't had against recommendation 6.
Or abstentions.
Yes, yeah, well, they'll always last anyway. So it's for recommendation 8. If you are against that.
Sorry, Malcolm, I don't think.
Sorry, I apologise. I said 6,
right.
and somebody said it's 8, so I did 8, and now it's gone back to 6.
You're fine.
I've sorted out a bit of paper here and the hand signals. So we are now going to do against for recommendation 6. That's 6. I sound like a bingo caller at the moment. So could you put your hands up if you are against recommendation 6? Okay. Hands down now, please. All hands down. Okay. The last one left on here then is now the abstain. If all your hands are down and you wish to vote for abstain, please put your hands in the air now. Right. I think that's okay. So that recommendation is agreed. Recommendation 6. Yes, 8 is on previous group. Thank you. Those are the votes for the that constitutional changes and so on. Thank you. We now move on to agenda item 69, which is the member question time, for which we have 30 minutes and supplementaries are allowed. Can I just remind you, as I always do, that executive members, that responses to questions must be no longer than 2 minutes, and that members that supplementary questions must be no longer than 1 minute, and these will be timed. So I have a couple of names here already. Is Councillor Guy Grandison there to ask his question of Councillor Clark, please?
Hello, Mr. Mayor. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes. Yes. Good evening, everyone. Apologies for being a little quiet this evening. I currently have a sleeping 10-day-old on my shoulder, so I do not want to have the camera on. But I wasn't planning to attend this evening due to that, due to the newborn. But I was asked by a couple of parents today, so I thought it was important that I did ask this question. But basically, what is the thank you, everyone. But what is basically the council doing to allow children and their parents to see prospective schools before applying to the school of their choices due to the unusual circumstances this year?
Well, it is a bit tricky presently, as you know, because of COVID. But we've sought specific guidance from the Department for Education on this matter. And they are saying that the decisions have to be made by the individual schools and in line with the individual schools' risk assessment. In the current period of enhanced national restrictions, the Council has advised all schools to move to virtual engagement with prospective parents. And throughout the pandemic period, we have advised against large school gatherings to minimize the potential for community transmission into schools and settings. And we have relayed this message several times to schools. Having said that, each school is supported to make their own determination as to what is safe in their particular setting. So they will have to rely on their own COVID risk assessment.
Thank you. Do you have a supplementary at all?
I don't right now, but I will correspond with Ula Corinne if anything further does come up. But thank you very much, everyone. I am now going to try and put this child down. But thank you. Have a very good evening.
Baby.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on then to Councillor Jim Fruin to ask his question of Councillor Pauline Jorgensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The recent proposed highway changes to Rose Street, a proactive initiative to reduce pedestrian risk. I believe this is a preventative initiative and thankfully not as a result of accidents. Graiseley resident Simon Cooper has spoken at several Wokingham meetings, including February 20 full council. He told us about 2 fatalities where vehicles crashed into his property in January 17 and January 20, multiple other non-fatal crashes, the effects on his family and the Graiseley community his frustration at the lack of action. Nearly 4 years since the first fatal accident, we have gathered multiple sets of data, in fact the same data after both fatalities. Simon has also captured large amounts of data and video examples. Since the first fatal accident, a range of executive members, senior counsel and senior Thames Valley police officers have offered kind words of condolence, support and sympathy to the Coopers and to the bereaved families. The reality is nothing has changed despite this stretch of highway, including a school and a community hall. My question is, why is the proactive and protective approach to resident safety being demonstrated by Rose Street Initiative not being applied across the whole borough? Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Fruin. The Council's position with regard to your questions raised by Mr Cooper, regard to questions raised by Mr Cooper at previous Council meetings has been very clear. In addition, you as a local member for Shinfield have also been made aware of this position through direct correspondence from officers advising you of all the actions and measures taken by the Council, both whilst the outcome of Thames Valley Police criminal investigation was pending and since their conclusions and recommendations were reported to officers. I must remind you that the officers are not allowed to release a police report to me due to requirements set by the police, but they have assured me that they have acted on all the recommendations in that report, which was only received in July 2020. I believe they've told you this as well. You're correct in saying that we have acknowledged and empathised with the Coopers' situation following the fatal collision at their property at the start of this year, and that officers have collected and calibrated traffic flow and speed data to support both the police investigation and their own professional assessment of viable measures to prevent any recurrence of such a collision. In addition to this, the Council has resurfaced this section of road, refreshed all the road markings, and in direct response to the police report, has undertaken maintenance measures to ensure the speed enforcement's team can commence such action and investment of some 65,000 whilst continuing to liaise with police officers and their investigative timescale. In parallel with this, officers have also undertaken feasibility design of a backup £100,000 average speed camera enforcement scheme, which would have to be approved by the police before it's installed, and are continuing to work with the Parish Council on gateway signing. The Council's strategy duty with respect to road safety is set out in Section 389 of the Road Traffic Act and involves the study of accidents and taking measures it deems appropriate to prevent them happening again. The Council therefore takes a proactive and protective approach to road user safety through the application of standards and due diligence in its design and maintenance processes. The application of engineering measures in circumstances such as Graiseley is by nature remedial and therefore targeted at specific factors deemed by investigators to have been material in the cause of a collision. In this case, the highway design or condition was not viewed by the police as a material cause for the collision.
Thank you. Do you have a brief supplementary at all, Councillor Fruin?
Yes, I do. Thank you. I was asked to provide advanced sight of a supplementary question, but without hearing the question, the answer to that was very difficult. So please excuse me if I get this wrong. I welcome the news, Pauline, that funding has been put aside for this area. I would like to understand what criteria we use in the justification, approval and implementation of highway safety measures to make sure they're consistently applied across the whole borough. There are examples across the borough where safety measures have been put in place when there have been no reported incidents. Thank you.
Jim, I could give you a layman's answer, but in case I get it slightly wrong, I prefer to give you a written answer, having talked to the officers.
More than happy with that. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. So the next one is that Councillor Swaddle to ask her question of Councillor Gregor Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question to Councillor Murray. Recently, during the course of our task and finish group on the local climate emergency action plan, Professor Paul Chatterton of the University of Leeds and a leading national expert on climate change praised our local Woking Borough climate emergency action plan as an example of best practice nationally. And he said that we're on the right track here with our focus areas and action. Could you tell me, therefore, the point of engaging a vast number of residents in running a very wide-ranging citizens' assembly in Woking Borough? Surely both the evidence presented and therefore the recommendations received will be similar or identical to those already run by other local authorities nationally, and most notably by the government via the Climate Assembly UK?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Swaddle. The Council is aware of the scale of the challenge that becoming net zero carbon will bring to all of us, and acknowledge that this will not be achieved without the active involvement of our community. Woking Borough Council believes that our residents have a great insight into the challenges presented by the climate emergency, and that local deliberative processes, such as citizens' assemblies, can empower people and communities to make important decisions in a way that is fair and deeply democratic. Woking Borough Council plans to run a programme of local deliberative processes, meetings, bringing together residents, local businesses, school children, environmental and social charities and other stakeholders to help investigate, discuss and make recommendations on some of the challenges that we face. The programme will comprise a series of small meetings focusing on specific topics that will help to find solutions that will reduce the borough's carbon footprint. Many of those topics may be borough specific or new to the borough, or may involve seeking solutions and challenges already identified, such as how will the council communicate issues around consumption emissions and what measures can be introduced aimed at increasing awareness of these emissions amongst residents? Or what should Woking Borough Council's 2030 net zero carbon vision be? And how life in Woking Borough will look like at that time? How life in Woking Borough will be different in terms of our homes, travel, work, leisure time, waste, and also the way that we source food, goods and services. The local deliberative processes represent an exciting opportunity to engage with our communities, and plans will commence in the new year.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. The next question then is Councillor Graham Howe to ask his question.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor.
Yes?
Do I get a supplementary?
Yes, I thought Councillor Murray went straight on to ask his question immediately after. But yes, okay, Councillor Murray, do you have a supplementary, or was that additional?
Councillor Swaddle has a supplementary, I think.
Yes, it would
That's
help
right.
if I
I'm
the
not
right
an
way.
executive member yet.
Yes, sorry.
Okay, yeah,
Just
I'd like
two
to
councillors,
just
yes.
pick up on something in your answer, Gregor, which was very interesting. You mentioned local deliberative processes a few times. Is this the same or different from a citizens' assembly?
That's a really good question. So on Saturday morning, as part of the Reading Climate Festival, I attended a presentation run by Extinction Rebellion, specifically on citizens' assemblies, what they are and what they mean. As part of that presentation, I learned that citizens' assemblies are just one of many different types of local deliberative process that can be used to help educate and take action on important and urgent topics. The Citizens' Assembly, so I learned, is a fantastic tool for national governments to make decisions on big, controversial and multifaceted issues. One was used in Ireland to help decide on the topics of gay marriage and also abortion. Recently, Climate Assembly UK, as you referenced, was used to help educate the government on its climate emergency action plan, which it launched earlier this week. Having taken the time to learn about the subject from the experts, I've learned that the term Citizens' Assembly is not a catch-all. It is one of the local deliberative processes that are available to us. So while it'd be easy to jump on a bandwagon and blindly call for a citizens' assembly, the simple truth is that other methods of local deliberative process may be significantly more beneficial for the needs of our community and for our climate emergency action plan. In fact, during the presentation, one of the speakers specifically said about citizens' assemblies, we're only asking for one, a national one. Locally, we need a different deliberative process. Now, I'm committed to doing the best for our residents and for our community, so we're keeping an open mind and assessing all of the options that are available to us. Options such as an advisory board or an advisory summit, a citizens panel or a citizens jury, as well as more specific repeat of the crowdsourcing of ideas process that we've already run. All of these potential local deliberative processes are advocated by an organisation called Involve, who are experts in organising these exact type of local deliberative processes. Whichever route we go down, we're committed to it being run independently of the council, of party politics and of activism. It will be representative of our community, including our secondary school children, and will also make recommendations having listened to evidence from informed experts.
Councillor Murray, could I ask that you come to a halt in the next few seconds, please, because we're getting quite tight on time.
I have done, Malcolm. I'm
Okay.
finished.
Oh, you have finished. Perfect timing then. Thank you. So, Councillor Graham Howe, would you like to ask your question of Councillor John Halsell, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The Leader of the Opposition has been sending a leaflet to homes across the borough claiming that the council's debt is £700 million. Could the Leader of the Council set out what our debt situation actually is, including where borrowing is generating revenue and income to pay for our vital services?
Thank you, Graham, for your question. I'm indeed aware of such a letter that is sent out to households across the borough, sent by the Leader Opposition, Lindsay Ferris. I was shocked and distraught that such alarming and incredulous mistruths are being infiltrated across our community, especially at a time when it is so important we demonstrate calm and assured leadership to engender assurance and confidence in the work of our council. Rather than make up fanciful figures intended to alarm our residents in the way Lindsay has chosen to do, let me focus on the facts and the truth. Although I appreciate that it is often inconvenient to the scaremongers amongst so when I do so. I refer you to the recently published mid-year Treasury Management Report to be considered by the Audit Committee in November and Executive in November. It is written by our Chief Finance Officer and Deputy Chief Executive. The CFO is the single person in the council charged to be aware and report on the veracity of our financial management and financial standing. Our CFO's report states that the real external debt in relation to our council taxpayers at the 30th of September 2020 is 324 million, which reduces to only 83 million net indebtedness. That's 83 million, not 720, after deducting the money we lend ourselves to others. This means that the figure in Lindsay's statement is overstated by at least 376 million, if I wanted to be generous, but in reality, the true measure of the overstatement is 617 million. Yes, that's right, councillors. Lindsay has written to our residents, overstating the council's position of indebtedness by 617 million, which is 2 years of council receipts. Furthermore, he goes on to state that our borrowing activities are costing our council taxpayers, or each household, £10,000 each. Turning again to the facts contained in the mid-year Treasury Management Report, our CFO says that the financial impact on the council taxpayer is not 10,000 but per council taxpayer, but is in fact £7.52 for a Band D payer. This is an incredulous overstatement by Lindsay of 133,000%. That's 133,000%. Moving to your specific point, the income from our investment activities financed by borrowing are also set out in the Treasury Management Reports.
Councillor Halsell, can I ask you to come to a halt as soon as possible, please? Another 10, 15 seconds if possible.
It shows our over 7.2 million is generated from one form or other, most attributable to the acquisition of the commercial assets and our Woking Town Centre to regeneration. Those of you involved in the ONS scrutiny of our budgets will be aware that this figure of 7.2 million is projected to increase significantly. In addition to this significant and vital income stream needed to fund our essential services, we of course retain the assets which could be sold to cover off the debt. Against our net indebtedness figure of 83 million, we have net realisable assets currently valued of over 500 million, or just under 200 million if we take the narrowest focus. Thank you.
Just a moment, please.
Yes, I do, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for your answer, Leader. Would you agree that the council is in safe hands and that the administration is steering a steady course through these turbulent and uncharted waters?
It is clear that our borrowing and investment activities are extremely well managed. And though we are serving our community well through the creation of vital income streams that would otherwise necessitate the draconian cutting of services we provide for our residents. At the same time, we are clearly also creating a sizable asset base that we will always have the opportunity to turn into cash if we need to. I would like to commend the Conservative Finance lead members of the years, particularly the current incumbent, John Kaiser, together with our very experienced and capable CFO, Graham Ebers, for getting us such a solid and strong financial position. On the other hand, I can only shake my head in despair at the destabilising, desperate and deceitful attempts of the opposition. It is irresponsible and brings the council, together with all those who serve it, into disrepute. Sometimes politics can stray into the most shameful and questionable ethical places, and I'm sad to say this is one such occasion. Our residents deserve better. We are determined to support those in need in the borough during this period and eliminate poverty in the borough. Profligacy would not enable us to be able to do so. Sound financial management from this Conservative administration does enable us to direct funds and efforts to those in need, whilst maintaining our services as business unusual. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Helsall, for that. That brings us to the end of that agenda item. And we are now on to agenda item 70, which is the minutes of committee meetings and ward matters. So if you're going to ask a question, it should relate to a ward that you're concerned with. If anyone wishes to ask a question, could you please let me know using the hands up feature? Right, I have some here. I'll go down. The very first one is Councillor Stephen Conway.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Will the Leader of Council join with me in thanking those local businesses, such as the excellent Emma's Kitchen in Twyford, which supplied free nutritional meals in the recent half-term holiday to children in receipt of free school meals in term time. I'm not, I hasten to add, making a political point, and I would appreciate it if the response was also not a political answer. I'm merely looking for acknowledgement of the Council's gratitude.
Thank you. Okay, so next, could we have Councillor Andy Croy, please? Oh, sorry, Rachel Burgess.
Could I have an answer, please, first? I think John would like to say something.
I'm too quick, sure. Sorry. Yes.
I apologise, Stephen. We have been very, very fortunate during this pandemic. Not only have we been fortunate in the excellent and magnificent performance of our officers, but also in all the voluntary sector who supported us, all the COVID groups, and all the independent businesses who have also supported us. I can only say my very grateful thanks. It has been a proud moment to be the leader of this council, and it's a really fine council to be the leader of.
Thank you. The next one we have is Councillor Rachel Burgess, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a ward question about proposed changes to Rose Street for the Executive Member for Highways. Now, I'm glad to see that action is finally being taken to make the crossing point on Rose Street safer. This is between Waitrose and Peach Place. It's been far too dangerous there for far too long. However, the proposed solution, it creates a single lane raised carriageway for the pedestrian crossing point with no right of way for pedestrians, as far as I can see. Priority is given in one direction for traffic, but crucially priority will not be given to pedestrians. And that design also begs the question how pedestrians crossing the road will know whether the stopped traffic is actually giving way to them to cross or giving way to the oncoming traffic. Now, we've heard already this evening residents have raised the need for proper pedestrian crossings in other parts of my ward, and this is another case in point. So my question is, will the council reconsider these proposals and put a proper pedestrian crossing in Rose Street, such as a zebra crossing, that gives pedestrians priority and actually puts pedestrians first? Thanks.
Thank you for your question, Rachel. The diagrams that you were sent as a member for the ward showing the layout of the crossings will be open for consultation. So they're not the final designs. They're a set of proposed designs. So I welcome your comments and we'll field them all into the mix of comments we get from residents and come up with the final design then.
Thank you. So we go on now to Councillor Pauline Hellier-Simons, please.
Thank you. My question is to the Executive Member for Highways. Road safety is a big issue in one of my roads called the Avenue in Wokingham Without, where people park indiscriminately and unsafely on a road where children go to 3 schools. It took over 2 years to get to a point where the promised consultation with residents actually took place. This was completed last March, with a letter of the result being promised to residents several times over the summer. In July, they were told it was imminent. In mid-August, they were told it would be sent as soon as possible. It has still not been sent. Now, new yellow lines have been put down outside one of the schools, and this has exacerbated the problem even further. This issue has been dragging on for over 2 years, as it was first raised in 2018, long before the excuse of the COVID outbreak. Please can you follow this up for me with both residents and officers?
Yeah, thank you for your question, Pauline. I've got a partial answer for you, but if it doesn't answer all the question, then please do come back to me and I will certainly follow up. So waiting restrictions to deal with poor parking behaviour in the avenue were recently amended outside Our Lady's Preparatory School as part of Amendment 2 to the Borough-wide Traffic Regulation Order. These measures were brought forward in response to local resident concerns raised in 2018 and following the process of statutory consultation to which all residents of the avenue were invited to respond. Unfortunately, that does take quite a long time. The local member for Woking Without will be aware that a second informal consultation of residents was carried out in March 2020. And the residents' responses to further restrictions being implemented have been mixed, with several stating they don't wish to see any further restrictions. Notwithstanding this, in response to the request from one resident and a local member for Woking Without, which I presume you, the council has recently advertised an intention to introduce a further amendment and will be consulting residents in the Avenue and other residential streets in Crowthorne within the next 2 weeks. It's important to point out that whilst residents' perceptions of poor road safety are acknowledged, the Avenue actually has a very good safety record. There are some occasional obstructive parking issues for which the council does not have the powers to enforce, as down to the police. But as some residents have pointed out, these are short in duration and only to be expected when living near schools where parents drive on drop to collect their children. The issues to be addressed are therefore much lower urgency than those being addressed elsewhere in the borough. But I can assure you that we're going to follow up. And if you have any more comments after that, I'll be happy to take them on board.
Thank you, Councillor Jorgensen. Councillor Caroline Smith, your hand was up and it's down again. Do you actually have a question?
Yes, I do. Sorry about that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, please. I'd like to ask the question for the head of highways. Since the end of the first lockdown, the shopping centre at Chelfont Way, the plaza, has seen a significant increase in car usage, mostly queuing for the McDonald's drive-through. The Costa coffee shop has added both traffic and dwell time in the car park, which exacerbates this issue. And this is before the KFC opens. Cars are often seen queuing onto the roundabout and blocking Chelfont Way, and hence access to both the BP garage and Asda. This is seriously impacting on local highways. So please can highways look into this matter to help solve this problem before it becomes dangerous? Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline, for the question. I believe that car park's private, so I'm not sure whether we'll be able to do much about the flow around the car park, but I'm very happy to look at the roads in and out. To be honest, I think it's partly a planning issue, plus the fact COVID's getting a lot more people to arrive by car. But yeah, happy to look at it. I'm not sure what we can do because I think a lot of the access is actually private.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Andy Croy, would you like to go next, please?
Thank you. My question is related to planning, and it's not about a specific planning application. So I hope that's all right, because I know there are rules on that. I'm wondering if there's an occasion where there is a development in a property, and it's likely to change the height of that property quite substantially. But we, as ward council, have been told, well, actually, there's nothing you can do about it. It's been devolved to officers. Is that really the case? Is there really nothing the borough can do? And what's the origin of this legislation? I guess that's what I'm trying to understand. So I guess that would be for Simon, I think.
Yeah, I would guess so as well.
Thank you.
This question should be answered by the executive member. I simply chair the planning committee.
Yeah, I'll pick that.
So my apologies, Simon. My apologies.
Evening, Andy. Well, you have the opportunity. Sorry, you have the opportunity to list it. The officer is only if it's a delegated decision to the officer. That doesn't mean to say you can't list it. That doesn't mean to say you can't speak to the officer. That doesn't mean to say you can't speak to me. That doesn't mean to say you can't speak to Claire Lawrence. And I would exercise all of those first. I don't necessarily agree with what you've said, and I don't know where you've got your information from. And I think let me have a look at the case, and then we'll pick it up after this, or pick it up tomorrow sometime.
Okay, thank you. Right, the next, are there any more hands up? No, there are no more hands up. So that is the end of that agenda item. We now move on.
Mayor, may I do a point of order? I think it is a genuine point of order, because I believe the council may be at risk of being misled by something that Wayne has said, because I think he's misunderstood Andy's question. Andy is asking a question about the new regulations. I've had one of these. You're not allowed to list these applications. It has now been banned from listing. We have had notifications from officers saying this is for your information only. You cannot list this application, even though it is for a 2-storey extension and an extra storey on a house or so on. So that is what he's asking about, not the normal planning applications. And I think Wayne has therefore given an incorrect answer by mistake.
Okay. However, the question was also not, in fact, a ward matter, strictly speaking, so it shouldn't have been allowed. However, we could, if we can deal with this offline and ask for it outside of the meeting, I'm sure you'll be able to get an answer.
I will pick that up.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Smith. So we now move on to agenda item 71. Statements by the leader, executive members and deputy executive members. We have 20 minutes for this, and I would like to indicate, or I'd like you to indicate if you wish to speak by raising your hand, please, if you wish to speak. Yes, Councillor Halsall has his hand raised. Would you like to speak, Councillor Halsall?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't think any previous leader has dedicated his full issuance of time on the council's finances. This evening I'm choosing to do this as I consider it a matter of extreme importance that our finances are well managed, and just as important that the actual state of our finances are properly understood by the council and our residents. If our financial health is poor, then it is not just an issue of questioning our collective competence in managing such a vital matter, but more fundamentally, it brings into question our ability to be a viable entity and provide the critical services we need to for our residents, particularly in such unprecedented, challenging times. If the public have no confidence in our financial management, then they have no confidence in the council, and the loss of confidence in this council at such a crucial time in our history would be disastrous. Because of cheap political headlines, the proffering of alarmist messages and pervasive political propaganda intended to mislead our residents, it will be, I suspect, a surprise to you to know that council finances are in fact extremely good. This is especially true in the context of the recent financial challenges which we have faced as a result of COVID-19. Such challenges precipitating claims of insolvency or mass draconian service and staff cuts in other local authorities. Although we need to remain financially astute and responsible, our position is far cry from this terrain. Our financial strength and financial standing is not something that has materialised overnight. In 2002, we, the Conservatives, inherited what can only be described as a financial crisis following a period of mismanagement by the Liberal Democrats. We had a perilous balances at only 2.3 million, an uncontrolled overspend of £1 million, and had to act quickly to arrest the fatal decline into insolvency. 18 years of irresponsible Conservative leadership has, amongst other things, been devoted to restoring, maintaining and enhancing the Council's financial well-being. This has entailed replenishing the balances to a safe level of approximately 10 million, delivering efficiencies of many millions of pounds year on year, generating new income sources through our commercially minded activities, whilst investing at unprecedented levels in key priorities such as highways, affordable housing and climate change. We were financially strong and resilient coming into COVID, and this was despite years of austerity from 2008, when we faced continual escalating statutory care costs and severe reductions in government funding. It is this financial resilience that has enabled us to step up in the ways we have needed to for our community throughout this pandemic. This is not just me making fanciful, misleading statements in the way that some have chosen to do. This is our financial track record, and our financial health is based on facts and on the reports of external experts. Our medium-term financial plan, agreed at this council meeting only February this year, states the following: our real terms cost of delivering services has reduced by 31% since 2011, which is primarily as a result of continually finding more cost-effective ways of going about our business. Our service efficiencies over the past 5 years alone amounts to 22 million on a net service budget of 130 million. I can find very little, if anything, over the years that amounts to service cuts. Indeed, we have been investing in services like waste collection and libraries, whilst other authorities have been paring this back. Our balances over the past 5 years have held at approximately 9 million to 10 million. We are the lowest funded unitary authority at £84 per person, while other authorities receive as much as £450. And yet we still manage to invest in services, including a capital investment programme for our community of 150 million to 180 million each year. Isn't it an incredible testament to our huge efforts and competence over the past 19 years that we've been able to manage our finances in this way for our residents year after year? Turning to the recently published Treasury Management mid-year statement, which I referenced in my answer to a question earlier, I apologise again that it's fact-based and not fanciful stories. In that, you will see our income from investment activities amounts to 7.2 million per annum, which is not inconsiderable sum. Because of that income, all of the borrowing the council has ever had to make to deliver on our capital schemes since WBC has existed, such as roads, schools, affordable housing, regeneration, is of almost no cost to the council taxpayer.
Okay, well, Councillor Halsall, can I ask you to come to a prompt close, please, because we have 3 or 4 other people who also wish to speak. Is that possible? Okay. I hate cutting you off, but I'm just trying to move Deborah.
5.2 for a Band D, to be precise. What's more, we've accumulated realisable assets of about 500 million. I'm extremely proud that I currently preside over a local party that has demonstrated over many years the highest level of financial responsibility and financial acumen.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
This is the 3rd time Councillor Halsall has broken Rule 4.2.23, which says that during the executive speeches they shall not be of a party political nature. Now, he may be proud of his party, but he can save that for his fundraising dinner. This is about the council. If he's upset with what the Liberal Democrats have done, I understand that. He needs to respond to that in kind and not use the leader's platform to do that. I'm not a fan of the Lib Dems, you know that, but I think we should all be sticking to the rules today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Croy. Can I move then at this point to Councillor Charles Margette, who has his hand in the air to speak. Well, his virtual hand on the screen to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members, I wanted to take this opportunity to just bring you up to date with our plans for the COVID situation in the borough and our plans going forward. Cases in Wokingham, as I said earlier, have risen this week to a rate of 155 per 100,000. This is partly due to a large outbreak at a local care home. Wokingham still has a lower weekly case rate than the South East or the English rate. Our expectation over the next few weeks is we will see a levelling off of the rise of cases as the effect of lockdown hits our figures. However, the overall trend is likely to be upwards and the situation will get worse before it gets better over the winter. Whilst the vaccine has been widely trailed in the national media, it is still many months away from the ground, and it is really important we all work together to minimise the threat to our borough. I'd take this opportunity to remind all listening of the importance of the key public health messages about washing hands properly, social distancing correctly, isolating correctly when asked to. COVID level for some weeks and have made a robust plan to protect our residents from the threat over the winter. The key points are as follows. Our care homes task force remains in place and hard at work. Their role is to support our care homes, give guidance on infection control methods, support with PPE, give out additional government grant money and support with outbreaks such as Shinfield View. This approach served us well from the end of April and we will keep it in place till the threat to our care homes has passed. This service is now available to all of our care settings. We're carrying out track and trace across the borough. We have a contact rate of close to 90% in partnership with the national system and are phoning and door knocking positive cases to ensure they are following guidance and receiving all the support they need. We've set up a group of COVID marshals who are out and about across Wokingham enforcing the lockdown and ensuring COVID secure rules are in place. We've set up a specialist schools task force to support and advise our schools as they deal with the threat of COVID and positive cases amongst children and parents and teachers. We have an active communication plan to ensure residents are aware of the key messages to remain safe and understand what to do to minimise the risk of COVID. We've continued with the one front door system with our partners at the CAB. This is the route any resident should follow if you need help during the lockdown. Please call this number if you need assistance and you will receive support. We're making regular phone calls to 4,600 of our most vulnerable residents. To date, we've phoned 4,000. The purpose of these calls is to check on their welfare, mental health and offer them any support they need. These calls are then referred on to our voluntary sector partners or adult social care to ensure that people get the help, any help they need. We're knocking on the door of every resident known to social services who is over 75 years old to check they're okay and identify if they have any needs. We've continued with our befriending calls with our partners at the Link. These calls are a vital way to provide support to those who are isolated and lonely. The council and the voluntary sector are working in partnership, as they did in lockdown 1, to ensure every resident in the borough is able to get through this period. We will continue to work hard to ensure that no one is left behind. Turning to the future, I can advise members we have an allocation of point of care tests coming to us very shortly. We're planning now how we can deploy these with optimal benefit and we'll announce our plans in the next few weeks. Point of care tests are the tests recently used in Liverpool and featured heavily in the national media. We're particularly aware of the risk of mental health to our residents during second lockdown. One of the key aims of the phone calls I mentioned earlier is to identify people who are struggling and help them through this period. We've brought forward as a result of this our new mental health programme and hope to launch this formally early in the new year. I'd like to conclude, Mr. Mayor, with a summary of the key messages for the winter months. Wash hands properly, social distance, follow all the rules, wear masks when you're required to, keep mixing indoors to an absolute minimum. The more we can all follow the rules, the lower the case numbers will be, the sooner we'll be through this and the lower the impact on Wokingham. Please call us if you need us and we will be there to help you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Margette. We move on swiftly now to Councillor Ulla Clark, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. The COVID Winter Grant Scheme announced by the government on the 8th of November is making over £200,000 available to Wokingham Borough Council to support struggling families and others in need. It covers the period 1st of December 2020 to 31st of March 2021 and it is up to the council to decide who is most in need and should benefit from the grant. The scheme is not designed to directly replace the additional free school meal provision made earlier in this pandemic. However, we know that families with children who qualify through means testing for free school meals are some of our most vulnerable, and we must ensure that children are not at risk of going without food during the winter school holidays. We will make funds available from this grant to support over 2,000 children and young people in the borough who receive means-tested free school meals at a cost of approximately £100,000. We are currently working out the detail on how to support, how this support will be distributed. One option is to provide food vouchers via schools. We're also exploring the feasibility of directly providing hot meals. However, this may be extremely complicated. The vouchers would be designed so they can only be used for food and groceries. The balance of the fund will be used to support vulnerable families and children, which includes nearly 100 care leavers. I recognize that there are families with children who do not qualify for free school meals, and others who will struggle over the winter. And we are working with the Citizens Advice Bureau, who, as our front door, are the best people to reach other families and individuals in need, because they are already aware. This will also include possible distribution of funds through voluntary organizations, who also are already providing support to those who need it. I would like to encourage any councillors who are aware of families in need to write to me or our front door, or anybody else who out there who is aware of that there are people in need. Please don't hesitate. Please let us know. I recognize the hardship faced by many people as a result of the pandemic, and I will continue to work to support those who need our help during these difficult and unsettling times. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Hook. We now move on to Councillor John Kaiser, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I must admit, it's nice to hear the leader of the council, who I believe is a qualified accountant, and also the chief financial officer, who is also a qualified accountant, making the statement tonight. That was quite interesting. But before I go on, I'd just like to talk about one area which we were determined as a group to keep on track, which was the action to try and eradicate poverty and deprivation in the borough, extending to affordable homes, homelessness, rough sleeping and general support to lift people out of poverty. I'm glad to report, due to the control and investments made by this council, it had allowed us not just to deliver the support needed, such as PPE and food, among the host of other support packages, but also allows the council to offer support and concessions to the poorest and most vulnerable in the borough. And as such, it gives me great pleasure to announce the following. We will be looking to extend 2 council tax discount schemes. 1, the extension of the council tax discount reduction grant to carers by discounting carers' allowance as part of the income taken into account when assessing who should receive the allowance, thus meaning more carers will be able to access this financial support. 2, the additional support for care leavers. This means the removal of the financial burden of council tax for these people up to the age of 25, a very important concession for these young people making their way in life. Both are worthwhile benefits for residents who need support and forming part of the borough's council strategy to try and eradicate poverty in the borough. And this has only been possible due to the successful management of the council's finances. In addition, we will, as you've heard earlier, be providing free school meals to children who qualify on a need basis during term times, not just the holiday period, but also during the half-term break. And we are currently working on the way this is going to be implemented. It has been frustrating to listen to the lies and rumour about the council's finances during this time, when people have many fears, illness, loss of jobs and income, and in some cases deterioration in mental health. Families not unable to meet with their grandparents are people most at risk. Statement to scaremonger at this time is not only irresponsible, but lacking any sense of feeling or respect for all those who benefit and rely on the many services delivered by Wokingham Borough Council. Rest assured, my intention is to run the council's finances in such a way to create savings and investments, which makes money available, which when we get back to normal, whatever that looks like, the council will still be in a position to deliver those services, at the same time having supported the residents through these very difficult and challenging times. While we have been responding to the pandemic, we've been ensuring that those most in need receive the services and support they require. This has meant we have incurred substantial costs, as all this has been going on at a time that our income's dried up, notably in leisure and car parking, and we've been diverted from delivering our saving initiatives. I found it extremely challenging to ensure the need of our vulnerable are met and trying to manage the council's resources responsibility. Fortunately, we came in this pandemic with a strong financial standing, created through robust and sound business-like approach to the council's finances over the years. This has provided income critical to funding our response, while contrary to some of the dramatical and vastly inaccurate statements about council's finances, we've always borrowed sensibly and continue to do so. We have used this to generate income and continue to have assets far, far, far in excess of our borrowing liabilities. As we come out of the shadow of COVID, you will see other incentives for the poor and the vulnerable. We are well placed to pursue this goal to eradicate poverty and deprivation in our borough, and we will continue to do so. As I've said on many occasions, a broke council is no good to anybody. Thank you.
Thank you, John Kaiser. And that's the last speaker in that item. We now move on to I think Councillor John Halsall's indicated to me.
Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to make a point of order. The leader of the Labour group seems to spend his life with the Constitution by his bed, but he doesn't seem to understand what he's reading, which is no surprise to anybody.
Councillor Halsall?
3 does not say what he purports it to say. It is quite neutral on what it says. So I'd like that corrected, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm happy to read it out. The last sentence, the last clause of the second paragraph of that rule says, speeches of a party political nature will not be allowed.
Okay.
That's very clear.
Okay.
Well said, Mr. Mayor. I've never made one, but I understand almost every time the Labour group stands up, it makes a speech of a political nature. So I'd like to correct that.
Okay, thank you. So we now move on to agenda item 72, which is motions. There are 30 minutes per motion on this, and I need to read the following statement here. In accordance with Rule 4.2.13.1, if no one wishes to speak against a motion, then I will go straight to the vote. On such occasions, the seconder will then not have the opportunity to speak, nor will the proposer have the opportunity to exercise their right of reply. And that rule will apply to all of the motions that are happening this evening. I won't read this out in full in front of everyone at each motion, but I will simply say this is also accordance of Rule 4.2.13.1. And then we'll go on. And at that point then, I now go on to agenda item 72.1, motion 444. And I need to read, sorry. I need to read something briefly out before I go to the proposer. I understand that the incorrect version of the motion was included in the agenda, and the date on the second bullet point should have read 15th of January 2021 and not the 31st of December 2020. A copy of the correct motion has been sent to all members and included on the website. Okay, after making that explanation, I now go to Councillor G. I understand you are proposing this motion. Do you have a seconder?
Yes, I do. Councillor Imogen Shepherd-Dubay.
Okay, so Maria G, proposer, Imogen Shepherd-Dubay as seconder. Do you wish? Oh, you can now speak for up to 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. The RNIB carried out a survey of 500 blind and partially sighted people when everyone who took part. Pardon? Do you want to say something, Malcolm?
Yes, there's a hand in the air from Councillor Jorgensen, Pauline Jorgensen.
Sorry, Maria. Sorry, Mr. Mayor. I wasn't quite sure when the point is that you actually stick your hand up to say that you want to speak on this.
Okay, it just appeared on my list, that's all. It could have been for any reason. I'm sorry about that interruption. But can I come back to you, Councillor G? Carry on speaking.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do you mind if I start again?
Yes,
with
of
my
course.
3 minutes?
Yes,
Thank
of
you.
course.
The RNIB carried out a survey of 500 blind and partially sighted people where nearly everyone who took part said that in the last 3 months they had collided with at least one obstacle, and a third of people had suffered an injury from a street obstruction. I therefore agree with Councillor Keith Baker, who said in 2008 that when it comes to pavement advertising, safety has to be paramount. Cluttered pavements are not attractive to visitors. There is attraction in a vibrant and buzzing town centre. Cafes and restaurants in a retail area encourage visitors to stay, to browse in shops and to access important services such as hairdressers and beauty salons. If we want more use of outside spaces for leisure, we need to manage our pavements, especially during this pandemic when personal space is so important. Pavement and advertising and unguarded cafe furniture are movable and therefore unpredictable, creating a potential hazard for residents and visitors who are sight impaired. This is why the motion considers them together. The Royal Borough of Windsor and Maidenhead prohibits the use of advertising boards on the highway. Bracknell Forest and Reading Borough Councils charge for pavement advertising with clear design and placement rules. We need coherent and well thought out policies, procedures and practices. What should our policies, procedures and practices be? This motion does not determine that. It leaves the details to officers, councillors, residents groups, voluntary organisations and businesses to work together to produce a policy in a timely manner that is lawful and which demonstrates that we are a consultative and inclusive council that lives by its community vision. We need this policy that supports all our residents to lead happy, healthy lives, that protect our children and vulnerable residents, and that nurture our communities and town centres and help them to thrive. This will require some considerable thought and discussion after tonight. That is the process that this motion will start. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Councillor G. I believe that in accordance with that 4213.1, it is at this point I would wish to ask if anybody wishes to speak against this motion. Let's see if any hands go up. This is a much longer list than normally appears. No, there are no lot.
There are at least 4 hands up, Malcolm.
Yep, they're not appearing on my screen. They must be appearing on somebody else's. Yeah, I've been all the way to the bottom. Yes, I can see 4 hands now. Yes, so if someone wishes to speak against it, then we don't go to the vote. Yes, that's right. So we don't go straight to the vote, in which case, now I will ask the seconder, Councillor Imogen Shepherd-Dubé, if she wishes to speak now.
It's all right. It's me. Yes, it's Imogen.
Yes. Do you wish to speak now against the motion?
I will
go straight.
I will reserve my right to speak at the end of everybody else speaking.
Okay, fine. Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak? Yep. I have to search for these hands. They're down a very long list. Okay. Pauline Jorgensen is got a hand up. Would you like to speak? Yes, Councillor Jorgensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Because of this new rule, I'm sadly, although I'm in support of ensuring that pavements are not obstructed, impacting disabled residents, parents with buggies and the like, I'm forced to oppose the motion because I can't actually amend it for the following reasons. We've already have a policy which was created in 2018 on A-boards, which is worded to include criteria as follows. The need for the public to pass and repass safely when using a public area is paramount, and therefore the following requirements must be met at all times when positioning A-boards in any place where the public has access. This specifically includes freedom of movement for disabled, freedom of movement for pushchairs, flow of pedestrians, access for emergency vehicles at all times. Failure to meet these requirements may leave the person responsible for placing the A-board liable to prosecution by the council. The current policy states that A-boards will only be tolerated on pavement where sufficient width of footway can be left clear to ensure safe passage for pedestrian wheelchair traffic or those using the area with pushchairs. A minimum area of 0.2 metres should be left clear. However, if the section of pavement is situated in a particularly busy pedestrian area, additional room may be required. In addition, the policy states that all A-boards should be of a high quality of a specified height and should be removed if they become unsightly or unsafe, inappropriate due to new developments, have any protruding elements that could cause a trip or a fall, are made of materials that could cause injuries, such as splinters or snagging of clothes. And the policy also limits the number of A-boards to one per business premises. In the event that an A-board is considered to be causing a nuisance or an obstruction of the free passage to the public, the council will remove them without notice to the owner and without liability to the owner. It seems to me these policies are adequate, if respected by shopkeepers or enforced, balancing the desire of business to advertise with the need to keep the streets safe for all our residents, something which I agree with Miria on. We do not need a series of bureaucratic working groups to write policies which already exist. We simply need to get feedback, ensure they cover all the issues and to enforce them. I would suggest, however, that we immediately adopt one of Miria's proposals. The policy will be expanded to include bollard covers, and we will put the policies out to public consultation to ensure the views of disabled bodies, impacted residents and shopkeepers are captured and any substantive issues with the current policy are dealt with. The council will furthermore commit to ensuring that once these guidelines have been fed back on and if any amendments have been made, they will be followed, and when issues are raised, we will be dealing with them properly. So regrettably, I'm unable to support the motion as written, but I would request that the policy outlined above and the commitment that I've just made are recorded in the minutes in the form of this speech. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. And the next person on the list is Councillor Charlotte Hayton-Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tonight I would have liked very much to have spoken in support of an amended version of this motion, asking this council to review and amend the existing council's guidance and consult with our residents, businesses, local charities and voluntary groups. It is regrettable that it has not been possible to make our suggested amendments after seeking much advice and guidance from officers. However, I do want us tonight to be able to minute our support for the right of all our residents not to be discriminated against in navigating our borough's streets freely and safely without the concerns of tripping over or being hindered by unnecessary street clutter, such as advertising bollards and excessive or ill-placed A-frames. As a council, we must look to safeguard all our residents, and in particular, as noted in this motion, those whom are partially sighted or pushing prams or with disabilities. I know that the majority of our businesses in the borough share these values and do not obstruct the pavements with advertising boards or bollards. In the last 2 years, there have only been just 8 complaints raised with the Highways and Planning team regarding A-boards. In light of COVID-19, the majority of the borough's businesses have removed their A-frames from our streets, helping residents to steer through our town centres more easily in a socially distanced manner. And I would like to thank them this evening for doing this. I know that our businesses are hurting and have been hit extremely hard this year with the COVID pandemic and 2 lockdowns. As Councillor Jorgensen has already said this evening, this council does already have local guidance, which was drawn up in 2018. I would very much welcome and support this council checking that this is in line with current highways legislation and with the Equalities Act, and consult on any amendments that may be necessary, including making it easier for officers to enforce any policies. Lastly, I'd like to emphasise this council's full and unfailing support for our local businesses. Our businesses have been incredibly supportive of promoting our stay safe and shop local messaging, and helped our residents to gain the confidence to return back to our town centres and villages to shop after the first lockdown. This council must continue to support our local businesses and shops, and with any policy help them to not only survive but thrive moving forward. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hayden-Taylor. And the next in line is Councillor Wayne Smith, please.
Can I just interrupt there a minute, Mr. Mayor? It's just I put my hand up and I wanted to speak for the motion. I wasn't sure it was spotted.
Sorry, who's speaking?
It's Caroline Smith.
Well, you're next on this list.
Oh, that's right. That's fine.
Yes.
I just want to make
so it's
sure.
Wayne Smith
Thank
first,
you.
and then you.
Thank you.
Carry on. So, Councillor Smith.
Yeah, good evening, Mr. Mayor. I'm not going to add any further details because Charlotte and Pauline have already said a lot of what I was going to say. But what I would also add that I am more than willing to work with Maria, and if necessary, go out to all the shopkeepers in the borough or in Wokingham town, because as I understand it, the complaints, the numbers I have, that we've only had 3 in Wokingham town centre over the last 2 years, to go out to all shopkeepers and business owners and talk to them. But I won't add anything else because, as I said, it's been very comprehensive updates from Councillor Jorgensen and Hayden-Taylor. But thank you.
Right. Thank you, Councillor Smith. And now we go to another Councillor Smith, Councillor Caroline Smith, please.
Hello, good evening. Thank you. I was just going to talk on the motion and support it. The motion before this evening has managed the impossible and has taken into account all the various users of our towns across the borough, from the retailers to the shoppers, and most importantly, protecting the most vulnerable users in our society. And all of us have a duty of care too. Over 20 years ago, I came to Woking to work, and in my first year, I was presented with an A-frame advertising board, which had vital information and which I instructed to place outside. At the time, buses came through the marketplace, thus making the pavement both busy and narrow. The first question I asked, can I do it? Various people told me where I was working was a conservation area, so not allowed. I could not find an answer to my question. 20 years later, we have a chance to rectify this. The businesses across various towns in Woking need to advertise their services, and this is an important feature of our towns today. But a balance is needed, as some areas are not acceptable for any A-boards or surplus street furniture. Therefore, through a policy, it can be made clear what is allowed and where. I therefore support this motion to develop with all interested parties' input and to have a definitive policy how street-level advertising and furniture can be deployed without inconveniencing our residents and visitors, including the most vulnerable members of our society. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Caroline Smith. And we move very quickly on to Councillor Stuart Munro, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I haven't got much more to add, really. As Wayne said, Charlotte and Pauline said the things. All I would just say is that as the guy who gets the calls from these businesses, and they're really, really struggling, we need to be very careful that we don't disadvantage them in trying to stay alive in this very difficult climate. And I know they want to put their boards in the wrong place, but these are the guys who need our support and to keep them in business, even if they're in narrow streets. So I'll just leave it there, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Munro. And the last person on I can see is Councillor Angus Ross, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I think probably those opposing this motion have said everything. There's obviously need of some control on A-boards, but it does seem after 2018 which I think all arose out of the very careful consideration of the Woking Town Centre Marketplace development, that we have put something in place, and especially considering the visually impaired, that as Councillor Monroe said, we do need to consider the businesses, especially at this particular time. Just the last thing I'd say is that I do hope that that policy which Councillor Jorgensen read out is readily available on our website for people to see, so that there can be good awareness of it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. And now, Councillor Imogen Shepherd-Bay, as the seconder, would you now like to speak? After which Councillor G will have the opportunity for right of reply. Councillor Imogen Shepherd-Bay.
Okay, no problem. I find it rather interesting that all of the councillors who have spoken against this, none of them are councillors in an area who represent an area that has this problem. This problem is particularly for the towns such as Wokingham, Twyford and Woodley. I'm not saying it doesn't happen in other areas, but these are the areas that have the main problem. So it's to speak in opposition for it. It seems a little odd because, you know, what experience of these areas have they got, you know? Let's be clear, those that are disadvantaged here are the disabled and the people with prams and not the businesses. They are disadvantaged by these signs. Any working day in Woking, and there are signs with protruding elements on our pavements, narrowing the passageways such that residents can't get past, and particularly if they have prams and wheelchairs. I certainly agree with what Pauline said about removing bollard covers, because there are plenty on Denmark Street where the pavement is particularly narrow. There may be a policy for removing these things, but I certainly see no evidence of them ever being removed, even when they're really obstructive. And are really obstructed. But this policy, if there is one, is not working, and we need enforcement that's very clearly happening, which is why we've brought this, which very clearly isn't happening, which is why we've brought forward this motion. Anyhow, so in all the towns such as Woking, the pavements have evolved over time, and the result is that they are of variable widths. In this time of COVID, in many places, the pavements are really not wide enough to people pass safely, even with only have a less than 1 metre distance. The problem with the social distancing has been made worse by the proliferation of street signs or A-boards on the pavements around the town. In some of our tighter spots, these street signs have been put out on the pavement, leave less than 3 feet of pavement, causing obvious problems with prams and wheelchairs trying to get past, and they do not have the option of just stepping in the road like somebody who just using their feet. There appears to be no active regulation or control of these street signs. Many are put in awkward and inappropriate places, and some are too small or too big for where they are placed. Woking Borough Council has a duty of care to ensure that our streets are safe for everyone to use. We do not want to thwart someone's business, and we realise that there may be a significant benefit to that business, but there are better ways of advertising their business on the street. If there is a room for it and the size is appropriate, all we're asking for is a full policy, and which is being enforced and put into practice and developed. However, it is something that is in desperate need of control for the sake of our public safety. I urge Council, please support this motion.
Thank you.
I have a point of explanation, please.
Yes, Councillor Jorgensen.
So do
I was named by name. I would just like to point out that neither Charlotte or I are against the policy. What we didn't agree with was the proposal in the motion of how to go about amending it, getting consultation on it, and implementing it. That's all.
Okay. Can I ask Charlotte Taylor, was your point similar? Because
my point was exactly the same as Councillor Jorgensen, but also a point of explanation. To say that we don't understand because we have different types of wards that aren't representing towns, again, that's totally factually incorrect. I have a ward which has shops in it, and also I'm the executive member for Regeneration. So to say that I wouldn't understand what it's like to have A-boards and advertising is completely incorrect.
Can I have a point of explanation?
Yes, okay.
I never said the A-board problem was exclusive to the towns, but it certainly is more of a problem in the towns, and I find it odd that none of the councillors who are representing towns are speaking on this, and that's an interesting point. That's all.
Okay. Point.
Early was the town last time I looked.
Yes, I'm not sure you need to live in the middle of a town to understand what happens in a town. However, at this point, then I can ask Councillor Maria G if she would like a right of reply before we go to the vote.
Yes, I would like a right of reply. So first of all, it's taken officers and councillors quite some time to find said policy on the website, and I think that somebody might have approached me to ask me about the motion and amending it, but nobody did, so that was a bit sad. This motion isn't just about policy; it's about procedures and practices. So the policy is not a policy; it's a guidance note. It's not searchable as a policy on the website. The other thing is that you have to have procedures and practices, and we don't have those. Now, there is a lot of legislation. For example, the Town and Country Planning (Control of Advertisements) England Regulations 2007, which says that anything not listed as having deemed consent needs express consent. We don't have that procedure. Highways Act 1980, which says that on the government website, it says that you need permission to place items such as A-boards on highways, including footways where vehicular traffic is prohibited. So the problem is we have a policy, but we don't follow the procedures and practices laid out in the law. And I think that is unacceptable. And we also don't enforce anything. I've been trying to get rid of a particularly problematic bollard cover for the last 18 months, and I have significantly failed with a variety of excuses put forward. We do need more consultation on this, and I stand by my motion because, first of all, we have a policy. Secondly, the procedures aren't in line with the law. They're specifically not in line with our public sector equality duty, and our practices are not such as to enforce it. So I stand by my motion, and I ask anybody who's thinking of voting against it to think that actually what you're voting against is procedures and practices which are against the law, and I don't think that councillors should be doing that. I think that we should have due regard to all aspects of the law, whether it's planning, whether it's highways, or whether it's equality duty. Think carefully before you vote against this, because what you're voting is to do something that's not legal. Thank you.
Councillor Haytham, thank you. Councillor Haytham-Taylor, you've stuck your hand up. Can I ask what it's for, please?
Thank you. Just another point of explanation. I didn't say anywhere in my speech that we had a policy. I said that we had a guidance note. Also, point of explanation. You said, Maria, in your speech,
we had a policy.
Sorry. Can I finish? Sorry. You said in your speech, we have a policy, and then again you said in your speech, we don't have a policy. It's guidance. So I think perhaps you're a bit confused. We do have guidance. We don't have policy.
Right. Okay.
Excuse me, I'm not confused. I said you had guidance. Councillor Jorgensen said specifically that you had a policy. You don't. You've got a guidance note. That's it. And that's what needs changing. And it needs changing in line with planning, highways and equality sector duty laws. That's what it needs changing for. I'm not confused.
Thank you. Okay. That's been covered by a whole number of speakers this evening. So we now move to the voting process, and we are going to use the hands up and down process again, which we all know and love, I think. So can you all make sure your hands are down, every one of them? I can't see any showing on my screen, but I need a second opinion. Okay, indicate, right. All the hands are down. We're going to vote for this motion, and the first option, of course, is to vote for. So if you wish to vote for this motion, please use the hands up feature now. Okay. Can you take all your hands down now, please? When they're all down, can't see any hands in the air. Okay, we are now going to ask for you to, if you wish to vote against, please use the hands up feature now.
Mr. Mayor, can you put me down as against, please? Barry Patman.
Councillor Patman against. Okay, thank you. Is Councillor any other councillors there who need to?
Yes, Councillor Weeks against.
Yes, I thought. Okay, thank you. BBSW. Right, Councillor Ross, you do you want to do something, or is your hand working? It's working.
My hand is working, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, that's fine. So can you take them all down now then? Take all the hands down, and we'll go to the third step. Are they all down? Let's have a look. Can't see it. No, there's still hands sticking up. Can you take them all down, please? Some very reluctant hands there. They don't want to go down. There's a couple of hands still up. Right, they've gone. Okay, we now move to the third stage. If you wish to abstain on this motion, please use the hands up feature now. Right, the motion is lost. Okay, thank you. So we now go to
point of order 4 to 12M, Mr. Mayor. Please, could we have an extension of the meeting until 11 o'clock? It's after 10 o'clock now.
Okay, bear with me. I'll just get my operating notes here. All right, do you have a seconder?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, Stephen Conway. I would like to second Prue's proposal.
Okay, so it's Prue, Bray, and so on. I'm going to go to the vote for the proposed extension. No discussion is allowed. So, as before, all voting, we will use the hands up. Please ensure your hands are down to start with. Make sure they're all down. I've got a hand still sitting up there. Can you take the hand down, please? Are we okay? Right. Anyone who wishes to vote for this, can you please, and that is to extend, can you please, you put the hands up feature now. And if anyone hasn't got a hands up feature, they want to tell us what it is, we can do that in a moment. Okay, can you all take your hands down, please? Anyone who wishes to vote. Yes, there's still hands up sitting in the air. Can we take all the hands down, please? Still one. Right, they're all down. Okay, anyone who wishes to vote against this extension, please use the hands up feature now.
Simon Weeks voting against.
Simon Weeks voting against. Councillor Patman, do you wish to declare your vote verbally?
Yes, also against him.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so can you put your hands down now again? All of you, please. They all need to go down. Right, finally they're all down. Okay, we come to the third and final option here, which is abstention. So if you wish to abstain on this extension, please use the hands up feature now. Okay, the result is that the meeting will not be extended and will conclude at 10:30 p.m. Okay, so that stage I turn my page back and look for next one. And the next one is 72, agenda item 72.2, motion 445. Councillor Cowan, I understand you are proposing this motion.
Yes, that's correct.
Do you have a seconder, sir?
Yes.
Can you tell me who it is, please?
Councillor Fruin.
Okay, Jim Fruin. And Gary Cowan for the first. Okay, Councillor Cowan, you have up to 3 minutes then to speak on this, if you wish to do that now.
Thank you. The motion is as written, but I would point out that I asked the leader of the council on the 23rd of January this year, the gist of a question, and the gist of it was, as 7 years had elapsed since the council last reviewed its governance, was this now the time for us to do it? His reply was that he shared my view, but to ask him again in July if he happened to be still here. COVID-19 mucked up July, but it's now November and he is still here, and I hope his view has not changed. The real points, tonight's meeting is an example. How many times has council business not been completed? How many times has questions not been answered? How many times have written answers been offered but never delivered? And how many times have submitted motions not been debated? In the current model, is this current model the best, or can we do better? I believe our residents deserve better. Additional council meetings now with restricted agendas to deal with the backlog might be a start, while at the same time instruct the council to review its current procedures. Once that has been set up, and we can work out how business in a modern council should be conducted and looked at in much more detail. I would ask the members to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we go to Jim Fruin as the hold on a moment, please. Again, we're following this idea where you have to have the option to indicate whether you're going to vote against or go to the thing. Does anyone wish to speak against?
Yes, Malcolm.
Right, thank you. And that means that the discussion will go ahead. So in that case, we go to Councillor Jim Fruin as the seconder. Do you wish to speak now or later on?
I'll speak now if I can, please, Malcolm.
Certainly. Please do so now.
Thank you. Our full council meeting in September was an example of us not getting through all of our business on the night. How many times has this happened? I would suggest too many. Our meetings are full because we have many things to do, especially in the current climate. Our residents rightly expect us not only to deliver services, but to continually look to improve services and to seek ways of becoming more efficient and cost effective. Our full council meetings are one of the primary and possibly the most important way residents can see and participate in council activities. If members have some time during the current lockdown, may I suggest you watch the recording of our September meeting? I've personally found 3 E's in rewatching this meeting. The first being enlightenment. It shows how we as a council behave. The second, to be blunt, I found it embarrassing. And the third, I hope, is education. We should learn from September's meeting. COVID has shown us that we can work together, we can collaborate to make difficult decisions, we can act quickly. It has shown us that we have the organisational strength and personnel to do things. If we have business to do, decisions to make, we should do this efficiently and in a timely manner. Repeatedly carrying forward business should be a rarity, not a regular occurrence. This motion is one way of helping us do this. I recommend it to the council, to the chamber.
Thank you, Councillor Fruin. We have a couple of hands up to speak. We go first to Councillor Clive James, please. Yes, Councillor Clive James.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would like to support Councillor Cowan's motion. Councillor Cowan has many years' experience on this council and has seen and taken part in many meetings. I totally share his conclusion that the existing democratic process has failed in recent months, resulting in our residents being badly let down. The EU motion that we finally got to last at the September full council first came to the council in October 2019, nearly a year before. The motion on Heathrow Airport was debated after it had been nearly a year old. Why has it taken so long for these motions to be debated? Absolutely simple. The Conservatives didn't want to talk about them. How can this be acceptable in a modern day democracy? How can the manipulation of rules as practiced by the Conservatives be right or acceptable? It isn't. The Conservatives often refuse extra time at council meetings to stop the council debating motions which are on the agenda. And they've done it again tonight. Is this because they don't want to be debating the provision of free school meals in the borough? The Conservatives often give long-winded answers to questions, and they spend ages on their party political executive member reports, as we saw tonight, party political speeches. The Liberal Democrats have long argued for a council meeting in January. We're very pleased that we now have one. I would go further, as Councillor Cowan suggests. The council must provide as many additional council meetings as is required to keep council business up to date. I hope that all councillors will vote for this motion because it supports democracy in our borough. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Clive. The next person with the hand up is Councillor John Halsall, please. Councillor Halsall.
Yes, sir. Mr. Mayor, it is true that there has been a high volume business in front of councillors over a succession of council meetings this year, and well done for everybody for getting through it. First, we moved to online meetings as soon as it was possible. In the intervening period, I met, as I do now, with the group leaders to inform them and to get their input into decision making. I do not know any other council who has done or attempted to do this. Let me set out for councillors some of the ways in which the Conservative group and I have attempted to address the issue in recent meetings. We moved the start time for council meetings, adding half an hour for members to discuss business and scrutinise the executive. We have stopped statements from the chairman of the council's companies, preventing them keeping members up to date with the work of these companies on behalf of the working residents to free up more time. We have even at times held back on Conservative members asking questions and speaking on items, removing their democratic rights as councillors in order to accommodate time for the opposition. The Liberals did not offer to do the same. Many councils, for example, Labour-run Reading, have yet to restore full council meetings, and few, if any, were as quick to restore the full schedule of meetings that we've done. Most members work hard and attend numerous meetings, committees and working groups every month, where so much scrutiny and decision making already takes place.
Point of order. I would like to raise point of order. John Halsall has indicated that we did not support anything. Then he'd like to check the members' questions tonight. He will find there was not a single Liberal Democrat question in that section. We deliberately cut our question short in that area, None of our campaign people asked questions in the public question area, and we only had a couple or maybe 3 questions in the ward area. So we cut down our content of this meeting to an absolute bone so that we could get through to what were 5 or 6 motions. There are several very interesting motions there. There is one on proposals for an local electric company. There's one on planting 250,000 trees with an amendment about having a COVID tree area for memorial purposes, and others. Things that were so much more important than a load of rubbish.
Councillor Ferris, it's meant to be a point of order rather than
made a point of order. I've made that point of order.
Come to the end, please.
I've done so. Thank you.
Thank you.
Having listened patiently, can I continue?
Yes, you may.
Thank you, sir. I'll backtrack a moment, if I may. Members work hard and attend numerous meetings of committees and working groups every month, where so much scrutiny and decision-making already takes place. I don't believe it is fair to add yet another full council when a proportion of our members join council meetings after working long hours doing a day job. Gary references democracy in this motion. Democracy for this council means that all us working through the rules and procedures that we members agree to adhere to. The council's ability to get through business requires the cooperation of all councillors to make their points swiftly and efficiently to enable as many people to speak. Our residents, this means not submitting lengthy questions read out in full, while ensuring that the questions also elicit information for residents on what the council is doing for them. To be fair to Gary Cowan, his usually brief. Our ability to get through business also depends on having the restraint to submit only motions which create a genuine debate, raise awareness among our residents, or addresses the big issues that can't be dealt with in our committees. Not too tightly drafted as these only can be voted against. I don't think any reasonable person would say that a motion which prevents us completing our business by arguing that we have too much business is the best use of the time we spend here serving our residents. I therefore won't be supporting the motion tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Helsall. The next one on the list is Councillor Chris Bowring, please. Is Councillor Chris Bowring there?
Chris
Bowring?
Mr. Mayor, can you hear me?
Yes, I can now.
Thank you very much for coming in on the telephone. I think the main controversy here is over the motions, and it's perfectly true that in recent months we have failed to reach the motion.
Councillor Bowring, it's not very clear what you're saying. You're on a phone, are you?
I am on the phone, yes.
Yes, sometimes it comes across clearly and then it disappears. Can you perhaps try again a bit closer to the phone, maybe?
He has the sound on in the background and it's echoing back to us. If he mutes his background.
Is that better?
Yes, that's
Get further away, Chris.
Give it a go.
I've walked away. Okay.
Let's try again.
Okay. I agree that the motions, that we haven't reached the motions is a problem. But as Councillor Halsall indicated, we have dealt with this by starting the meeting half an hour early, and we've cut out the council-owned company's reports, saving us 50 minutes, which means we now do reach at least 2 motions. We processed 3 motions in September, and we're processing at least 2 motions this evening, and I think that's fair enough. And therefore, we have a good balance. We have a very long council meeting, 3.5 hours. I don't think it's in anyone's interest to extend that even further. And the idea also that we should have lots more meetings to process motions, I think is completely illogical. There has to be some sort of rationing procedure. We could be inundated with motions. And I think that a reasonable number of 2 per council meeting is perfectly acceptable. And I would suggest that there should be 1 motion from the administration and 1 motion from the opposition. And that would be a good rounded 3.5 hour meeting, which would not require any extension. And I think that's perfectly reasonable. And I think members should support that, which is the present situation. The other matters about long questions and answers, yes, no doubt there are problems here, but they can be raised in the Constitutional Review Working Group, and I'm sure that would be a very good idea. But the fundamental structure of council meeting at the moment, I think, works and should be preserved, and I think members should vote against this motion.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bowring. The next name here is Councillor Stephen Conway, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to be supporting Gary Cowan's motion. I agree with the sentiments that lie behind it. In response to a point made earlier by John, I actually work hard in the day, but I still think we have a duty to actually try to make sure that the council is transparent and open, and that we debate issues of concern to our residents. The way council meetings are currently structured, I'm afraid that here I have to disagree with Chris, is far from optimal. I'm afraid we've seen this evening questions to executive members, from written questions to executive members, where they seem to have knowledge of the supplementaries. They seem to be reading responses to the supplementaries. This is all, I'm afraid, just spending an awful lot of time asking questions that we know the questions are merely there to enable executive members to parade what they're doing, which is really inappropriate. We have very long speeches from executive members, often, as we've seen this evening, of a highly political nature. Those really could be taking place, if they're going to take place anywhere, in the council's executive. It's not as though executive members are starved of opportunities to speak. They can tell us what they think, and they often do at great length in council executives. We really don't need to hear them again in a full council meeting. And if we had the opportunity to remove those elements from the agenda, we would get through more motions. And ultimately, motions engage all councillors. They have an opportunity to become involved. And, we have a duty to try and make this a participatory council. So I fully support Gary's motion, and I hope all members will do so likewise if they really care about local democracy.
Okay, thank you. The next speaker, according to this list, is Andy Croy, please. Councillor Croy, are you there?
I'm very much here, Malcolm.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so sorry about the delay in switching on. I'll be very, very quick because I know other people want to speak. It's such a shame we cut short debate tonight. We could have expressed a love for trees, which is good. We all like trees. We could have voted on the climate, or rather a citizens' assembly, which is really important, and it's the only way to give a credible answer to the climate challenge facing us. And we could have also discussed the very important issue of free school meals, and I suspect the rather inadequate response of the Conservatives. We will be supporting Gary's motion. Final point. Congratulations to John. He got his political parts in the right part of the meeting. The leader and the executive statements are a part of the meeting that are privileged to you because of the roles you hold in the council. They're not the place for political point scoring. That's what the rest of the meeting is for. So well done for getting it right the second time.
Right, thank you, Troy. And the next one looks like it might be the last one speaking at the moment. Depends how long she speaks for. Is Councillor Prubray.
Thank you, Malcolm. I'll keep this brief. I've been a councillor for 20 years, and rarely have I heard such time-wasting twaddle as we've had from the Conservatives this evening. I have to say it was quite entertaining, and I did actually laugh out loud when the leader of the council said he hadn't made a political speech. I think that's a delusion of Trumpian proportions. The final thing I want to say, and I will be supporting Gary's motion, is that if Conservative councillors can't be bothered to sit in a council meeting and do the job for which they receive an allowance, they should make way for somebody who can and will resign. Thank you.
Thank you. And last one, about 2 minutes left, is Councillor John Kaiser, please. Councillor Kaiser, are you there?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, I've sat here and listened to this, and to be quite candid with you, I mean, we can't be more open. Overview and scrutiny, budget through overview and scrutiny. We invite the leaders of the opposition groups once a week to talk about the issues that are going on in the council during the COVID thing. We're a very, very open council, and to hear this twaddle tonight, to be quite honest with you, and I sit here and I hear people talk about things. They bring things along that we've already agreed. We've agreed the council tax, guys. We agreed to sign the council tax with the CAB. We've agreed that. We've agreed to give the children food. You know, you don't need to push it down again. OK, we've agreed to do those things. If you'd waste less time, I'm very much in favour of seeing this council get into all the motions. And when I was a mayor, I always felt that 3 motions was perfectly reasonable, that they could be submitted and those motions could be agreed, and anyone that didn't get through could go to the next meeting.
Thank you, Councillor. It is now 22:30. It's the end. We have to go straight to the vote on this. So can you please ensure that all your hands are down? Are they all down? There's still a few up. There are. Okay, well, if you think they're all down, okay, we now go to those who wish to vote for. Please use the hands up if you wish to vote for.
Can we have a recorded vote then, please, Malcolm?
Are 6 people ready to stand and request that?
I'll support that.
Yes.
Yes.
I'll support that. Yeah.
Okay, can you put all the hands down and then just put up the ones who want to? No? Are we, okay. So it's a recorded vote.
6, Malcolm.
I believe it's going to be 6 or more to get a recorded
There was more
vote.
than that.
Okay.
Shall we turn our cameras on and make it easy?
This is fine. You got 6 or more. We'll trust that's happening. So it will be a recorded vote.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So in terms of, I'll read out the councillors, and if you can say for, against or abstention. So Keith Baker.
Abstention.
Harry Bath.
Against.
Rachel Bishop Firth.
For.
Laura Blumenthal.
Against.
Chris Bowring.
Against.
Shirley Boyd.
For.
Prue Bray.
For.
Rachel Burgess.
For.
Jenny Cheng.
Against.
Lucraine Clark.
Against.
Stephen Conway.
For.
Gary Cowan.
For.
Andy Croy.
For.
Richard Delinsky.
For.
Carl Duran.
For.
Lindsay Ferris.
For.
Michael Firmager. Michael Firmager. Paul Fishwick.
For.
Jim Fruin.
For.
Maria G.
For.
Guy Granderson. Guy Granderson. Okay. Charlotte Haytham Taylor.
Against.
John Holsall.
Against.
David Ho. Pauline Hellier Simons.
Against.
Emma Hobbs.
Against.
Graham Howe.
Against.
Clive Jones.
For.
Pauline Jorgensen.
Against.
John Kaiser.
Against.
Diane King.
Against.
Abdul Loys.
Against.
Tahir Maher.
For.
Charles Magetz.
Against.
Adrian Mather.
For.
Ken Mile.
Against.
Andrew Mickleby.
For.
Stuart Monroe.
Against.
Gregor Murray.
Against.
Barry Patman.
Against.
Malcolm Richards. Angus Ross.
Against.
Daniel Sargent.
Against.
Imogen Shepherd de Bay.
For.
Rochelle Shepherd de Bay.
For.
Caroline Smith.
For.
Chris Smith.
Before I vote, Mr. Mayor, can you confirm at what time a name vote was requested and whether this was before or after the close of the meeting?
Point of order, there's no comments allowed during the vote.
Well done, Carl.
I understand that the request for recorded vote is part of the voting process.
Chris Smith.
I'd like kind of that confirmed because we, at the close of the meeting, we immediately moved to the vote.
Yeah.
Not a name vote, a normal vote.
Yes, but it's part of the voting process that one could ask for it to be recorded after the agreement is we go to the vote and then somebody asks for it to be recorded. So it's part of the voting process.
But we should have moved to the vote immediately and therefore they wouldn't have had an opportunity to.
Oh, come on, Chris.
But it is part of the voting process, I have to say, Councillor Smith.
Right. So
Chris, it's not going to be anything.
I don't concur, and I think this should be checked before it's recorded as part of the minutes.
This is wasting our time. Just vote already. You're going to defeat us anyway. What's the big deal?
Imogen, I did just vote. Thank you.
Wayne Smith.
I'm not me speaking at you.
Wayne Smith.
Against.
Bill Soane.
Against.
Alison Swaddle.
Against.
Simon Weeks.
Against.
Oliver Whittle. Oliver Whittle.
Susan, I've had a message from Michael Firmager saying he was voting, but you
All
couldn't
right.
hear him. Did you ask him again?
Yes, Michael Firmager.
He's saying against, but his microphone's not working, I think.
Can he put something in the chat?
Yeah, he could put something in the chat.
Yeah. Oh, right, he's put it in the chat. Thank you.
Right, so on that basis, the meeting terminates at this time. We do not continue. So it's the end of the meeting.
Can we have the result of the vote, please, first?
Uh, 21 for, 27 against, and 2 abstentions. So the meeting is, as I said a few moments ago, it's formally closed now.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Splendid job. Well done. Thank you.
Well done, Malcolm.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
Have a good evening.